Good morning, everyone who's already online. If you're looking for the monthly meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council, you found it. And we now have the virtual room open, and we'll give people another minute or two to go through the portal, and then we'll get to today's business. So thank you, and please stand by. Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome. I would like to convene the June 6, 2025 meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council. And first off, we'll have a roll call of the membership.
Thank you, Chair Hall. One moment. For the record, Councilmember Meehan will be late today. Councilmember DeFantorum. Councilmember Farrell.
Here.
Chair Hall.
Present.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Mena.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Willard. We do have quorum still, Chair Hall, with 6 council members in attendance.
Very good. And next we have our regular review and follow-up on action items. Do we have anything today?
We do not, Chair Hall. All follow-up items and action items have been expressed, and we have nothing further outstanding at this time.
Okay, good to know. Well, it's time for the chair's report, and I want to say I am excited about our meeting today for many reasons, including the fact that we're going to be acting on so many more funding proposals. This time around, we'll be looking at helping to create 230 more homes. Our landscape, it's always shifting, but it feels like right now we are living in a time of unprecedented uncertainty. We have to adapt and, when necessary, find new ways of doing business. Thanks to great leadership in this agency, we're seeing continued steady progress toward the goal of making sure that every Oregonian has a safe, decent, and affordable place to call home. And we'll continue to uphold our values, Oregon values, as we proceed to a better tomorrow. Now, one of the big question marks about the future is potential changes to policy and funding at the federal level. As I hand it off to you for your director's report, Director Bell, I want to ask, is there anything you can tell us at this point about what's happening in Washington?
Yeah, well, good morning, Council. Good morning, Chair Hall. It's really good to be in virtual community. Sure, I have several updates for the Council this morning, and I will look to incorporate that in there. And then, as always, if there's questions and discussions, I will make room for that. So first off, just to connect the dots for a couple of the agenda items that we have today, particularly for affordable rental housing and home ownership, I want to take a moment to connect the dots for some of the updates and kind of areas of progress that the teams will talk you through today, and how that connects to previous and ongoing conversations that we have had about continuous process improvement as a department. That continuous process improvement, as this council is probably well aware, that exists in a lot of different forms. Areas of process improvement in terms of how the agency continues to function to make things streamlined, more transparent, more accessible in how we aim to deliver the outcomes and make life better. continuous improvement in terms of policy setting processes. And as I've mentioned before, some of the really important parts of the policy setting process is not just the front loading of the engagement and the establishment of the policy itself, but then making sure that we go back and check in and evaluate that policy with data. And as this council has continued to really hold us in high expectation too, particularly around disaggregated data, is going then back to check in on those policies. And so I want to talk about today, maybe just signal for the council areas of continuous improvement. As you all know, part of our core mandate across all of the work that we do is and has always been to serve the people of Oregon, particularly individuals and families that have low and moderate incomes. And part of the effectiveness, one of the areas of effectiveness by how we should be measured and how we deliver that work in concrete ways that makes life better and more affordable for folks, is understanding what people's needs are and understanding how those needs vary. What I mean by that is getting an increased set of resources and pushing those resources out doesn't mean that a rising tide lifts everyone up. And so it's important that we continue to develop solutions that meet those needs, particularly for communities in which we haven't always done a great job at making sure that those needs are met. So as we continue to focus on continuous improvement, not only in terms of in theory, but in real practical ways that we can measure, it also means that we are continuing to listen and to hear, particularly in this moment. And as we are continuing to listen and focus on continuous process improvement, we want to continue to also make sure that we are bringing our learnings to the council about where we need to adjust along the way so that we are making those decisions not only publicly and collectively, but also so that we can seek the guidance from council based on your own individual expertise, the goals and values of this department, and really measuring up against what people need and how they need us to respond to meeting their housing needs. As far as today's presentations, there's a couple things that you can expect from us, which is one, we want to highlight some of the ways that we are leaning into that improvement. So for example, in affordable rental housing and home ownership, there have been some concrete steps to make it possible for more organizations that are culturally specific to be able to access certain resources. Affordable rental housing has provided additional clarity to our development partners regarding contracting targets, particularly for minority, women-owned, and emerging small businesses and service-disabled veteran business enterprises. And so the conversations that we have had to date about continuous improvement, the conversations that we've had to date about making sure that we are operationalizing our values and being resilient to different changes, but also knowing that our work doesn't stop. Our work continues. And not in watered down form, but certainly we want to make sure that this council can be engaged in how we are changing and what we're doing, and then that we can collectively continue to measure people's experiences, and then at the end of the day, what the outcomes are, and that we are continuing to measure those outcomes not only by our purview, but also where we'll need the council's purview to help direct and provide guidance to us about how we are measuring those outcomes and then bringing those to council for public and open dialogue as well. So that's one thing I want to signal. The other two things, it's been a while since we've talked about these two areas of newer business for us, but in this biennium, we received the first set of investments for modular housing production. So there was a House bill, I believe House Bill 2001 in 2023, that allocated resources to us to grant funds in order to increase the state's capacity and readiness to deliver modular housing developments. So there are 5 grantees. We recently spent some time with one of them, Blazer Industries out in Umsville, Oregon, to get a firsthand look in person about how those resources are being put to work. and particularly leveraging technology to really help think about ways to speed up development timelines, to have more kind of cost-efficient ways to be responsive for individuals and for communities that might be interested in considering modular housing development across their housing continuum. And then to also think about really specific and concrete ways that we can increase our state's readiness to be responsive to the modular housing needs here in Oregon. So over the next few, hopefully weeks and months, we'll be spending some time with the other grantees, what you can expect from us, because that is a new investment. And as you can imagine, we are learning a lot. We also want to bring that back to council so that council has awareness about how those resources are flowing, how each of the grantees' proposals and work is being actually delivered, and then what that means for the future of our housing continuum when it comes to modular housing. So that's one thing that I want to put as an item for forecasting that we'll bring back. The other one is around co-location. So I think it's been some time since we've talked about co-location, but prior biennium, OHCS worked in partnership with Build Up Oregon to explore and assess opportunities for how the state might solve a couple of issues in one. And so we recently released about $7.4 million to several different projects. And each of those projects in their own way, in the context of each of their communities, not only expand affordable housing, but also do so with early learning and care co-located and or nearby to that housing development. So those projects, there are about 9 projects, I believe, across Yamhill, Multnomah, Jackson, Deschutes, Washington County. I'm sure I'm missing a few in there. But it's really excited. It's really exciting for us, particularly as the state's housing agency. We are not misillusioned that early care is not our core expertise or core work, but it is one of the ways in which partnerships, particularly at a state and at the state and local level, are continuing to be really important. Across these projects, while they're different, each of them in their own unique way are serving infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. To have and also have sort of tailored classroom and specific curriculum and care. Some of them serve children with disabilities. Others are expanding the imprint of Head Start. And then some of them are mixed use as well, meaning that they're serving seniors as well as serving little ones as well. So really exciting to think about how we can be responsive in this way. I'm sure as many of us know, or anybody that might be listening, know that there are a lot of families across our state that not only are struggling day to day with the availability and the affordability of housing, but also if you expand your family and you've got young kids, you also need to have daycare and safe, affordable, quality daycare, and one that doesn't burden you by meaning that you have to drive an inconvenient length of time to be able to get there. And so this becomes one of the ways in which I think that we can think about how housing can help improve quality of life, not only by increasing capacity of it, but also thinking about how we can be responsive to other needs as well. But I also think is reflective of some of the areas of urgency and push from the council about how we can stack resources and solutions as opposed to thinking only and specifically in our lane as well. So over the next few months, we'll be planning to bring that back to council to provide some more substantive updates and statuses regarding that, just to have conversation about that topic. To Chair Hall's topic around the federal landscape. Obviously, understandably, the evolving nature and shakeups at the federal landscape has garnered a lot of interest and attention. I think a couple things of note for the council's awareness. On May 30th, the federal administration released its fiscal year 2026 budget proposal. This comes right after the quote unquote skinny budget, which was released May 2nd. In our review, there isn't much daylight between those two sets of budget proposals. We will be sharing with council more substantive updates, both around just what's included in there. And then, of course, I think we'll have a whole slew of work together to think about how this informs our next steps together. In terms of process, ultimately, Congress decides fiscal year 2026 funding. And so the way in which I've been orienting my thinking is the budget proposal is the beginning of the appropriations process. So I imagine that it will be lengthy and certainly voluminous in conversations, recognizing that the housing needs of our state are shared across the country. And so we'll continuously bring updates and conversations and decision points for us to engage in together in that regard. And then the last thing before I turn it over to our colleagues in government relations, we're still actively in state session. We are several weeks out from session concluding. As you can imagine, after coming off of several days of budget presentations, we're in the phases of a lot of conversations being had within the context of our state budgetary means and trying to solve a lot of important problems that are reflective of the needs of our state. And so with that, I'll yield to government relations to offer an update, and then also want to maybe just take a brief pause to see if there's any curiosities or questions from any council members around those updates before we go into session updates.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you, Director Bell, for that update and all those exciting things. I am wondering, and it does not need to be answered now, when and how we step back into a statewide housing plan discussion, because it feels like almost everything that you're talking about is a strategic intention to move in directions, to look at different ways and collaborations. And that kind of work, I think, best happens when we understand what is the overall umbrella and where we are trying to get to over a period of time, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, but over several years period of time. So it just feels incredibly timely for us to revisit the conversation about when we will refresh, redo, update, whatever we want to call it, some form of a strategic plan that encompasses everything you just spoke to and, you know, a whole lot more. So interested in us having that discussion because we need to do it. And we need to be able to constellate all of the important projects and work underneath an overall strategy. Thanks.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Councilmember Lee. And from a tactical perspective, I would expect by the end of July, we will be engaging with the council on just sort of initial questions and I think areas of engagement around where we want to go with the next strategic plan. And so I would expect before the end of July, we will have something for council, not in terms of decision points, but where we want to start the process of garnering ideas and where we want to go. The other thing that I will say that I really appreciate and am drawing from your remarks is, as important as it is to observe and learn all of the environmental changes around us, we as a department, you all as a council, us together, we are not without purpose and trajectory of what is required of us. And so we are not waiting for direction about where we need to go and what we need to do. And so I know that this council is aware of that. And I want to just reflect back what I'm drawing from that, which is let's engage in that process so that we can begin to identify and document our own trajectory. And so I appreciate that. All right, that concludes it for me, Chair Hall. I'm not seeing any curious faces or any hands up for now. And so as you see fit, I will turn it to Jill Gray from our Government Relations Department to provide an update on session.
Great.
Thank you, Chair Hall, and thank you, Director Bell. I have some slides, and Marissa, thank you so much. I was just going to ask to have those pulled up. And once again, it's been a couple months since I've been here, but once again, I am Jill Gray. I'm the Assistant Director of Government Relations for OHCS. And I have a brief session update to share with everybody. And so, Marissa, we can go to the next slide. And we thank you so much. We have used this slide a few times, these key session deadlines, but for government relations, we just want to make sure everybody knows where we are in the process of this legislative session. And so once again, this year is an odd numbered year, and so we are in a long session, which means these are the sessions where the state agencies' budgets are determined for the next biennium. In order to end in June, because session goes from January to June, there were all sorts of key deadlines that legislators had to meet. We have actually progressed through all of these key deadlines except for the last two. So I will have your eye go to the last two bullet points. And June 18th is target sine die. Sine die just meaning that is the adjournment of the session. Legislators have given themselves the date of June 18th as the day that they would like to end session. The very last bullet point, June 29th, constitutionally, they are required to end session by June 29th. I've heard that we probably aren't going to make it to the target sine die date, that we will probably go into the last week of June. But no matter what, we are looking at the last few weeks here of this legislative session. So we are getting down to the very end of the conversations. And really what that means is a lot of the policy conversations have been completed, and it's now really focused on budget discussions. Director Bell and I have talked about this a couple times, that there are difficult decisions that legislators are facing right now. In fact, I'm sure everybody saw that the state economist released last month Oregon's quarterly revenue forecast, and he is anticipating that in the next biennium, the state will have fewer resources available than previously anticipated. However, he was also very clear that Oregon is not in a recession and there are resources available to the state. I think the question for this group is really, so what does that mean for OHCS's budget? And unfortunately today, I don't have an answer for that. Our state agency budget hasn't been scheduled for a hearing yet, which means that the details of our budget haven't been posted yet. We are, of course, eagerly anticipating that to happen very soon. But I will have to leave you on a cliffhanger for today and say that we'll come back in at a future Housing Stability Council meeting and give you more details about the budget. But just know it is an active discussion we are having, and that it will be released very soon. All right, we can move on to the next slide. So instead, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the bills, where we have landed with a lot of our bills. And we're going to start with the two bills that OHCS asked to be introduced this session. The first bill is House Bill 3034. We have talked about this bill before. This bill is clarifying in statute that OHCS is the administrator of the emergency housing account. It also clarified that the Housing Stability Council is an advisory entity to OHC in administering the emergency housing account. It actually passed the legislature and it was signed by the governor last month. So we are done with this bill and it has become statute. And I will just give a shout out to the Housing Stabilization Division for working so hard on this bill and getting it passed. That is a win for OHCS this session. I'll move on to the second bill, House Bill 3035. We also have talked about this bill previously. This is the bill that would codify flex lending in statute. We were alerted fairly late in the legislative process that there was an unintentional consequence of the drafting of House Bill 3035, and that in fact it would have could potentially have a negative impact on our lending programs, which obviously was not the intent of House Bill 3035. We decided not to move forward with this bill because in the process, we also had conversations with DOJ, which provided us additional clarity and clarification that we do have the legal authority to continue operating flex lending. So the decision was, We're going to let House Bill 3035 go this session. We're going to continue operating flex lending. And in the meantime, we're going to take a little bit of time to regroup and rethink about what we want to do as far as codifying flex lending in statute. We obviously do not want to do it in a way that would impair our ability to do any type of lending. So we're going to have some conversations with DOJ and others about how to make that happen for the future. But just know, DOJ was very clear that they think that we have the legal authority to continue operating flex lending. So in a practical sense, nothing is going to change, but we'll work on getting that extra level of security of possibly codifying flex lending in a future legislative session. All right, we can move on to the next slide. And then we put down on government relations, put down some bills that were some priority bills we're working on this session. This obviously is not an exhaustive list, but I'll just go through these and I'll give you a very high level detail of these bills. And just know that we have specific legislative coordinators who are assigned to each one of these bills. And if council members have questions, I may have to come back with an answer later on and go and talk to the legislative coordinator who knows these bills in much more depth than I do. But we'll start with the very first one at the top, House Bill 3644. This bill is a governor's office bill. They are the ones who introduced it, but we are supporting them in the work of this bill. This bill is taking the recommendations that came out of the shelter work group that Representative Marsh and the governor's office led last year. So to clarify, there is funding for shelters that is part of our budget, but this bill is really talking about what to do with that funding. The recommendations that came out of the shelter work group were really targeted toward three areas. One was how we fund shelters, one was what we fund, and the last one was better data collection. This bill is taking all of those recommendations and putting it in statutes have really helped elevate the shelter program. House Bill 3644 is currently in Ways and Means. Going to the next item, House Bill 2139. We've also talked about this bill before. This bill is creating a tribal housing fund. We have operated the BAFI NATO program, but there were some limitations with that. And one of the comments that we have heard from our tribal partners is the need for a much more flexible source of funding. That is really the genesis for House Bill 2139. This is the bill that would create a much more flexible source of funds for tribal partners, for the 9 federally recognized tribes to use on the housing priorities that they have identified for themselves. House Bill 2139 is also a governor's office bill that we are supporting them on, and it is also in Ways and Means right now. The next one, Senate Bill 829, creating an affordable housing insurance premium assistance program. And what does that mean? One of the concerns that we hear frequently is about insurance and the rising cost of insurance. And really that is across the board. And one of the things that the governor's office worked on is with our partners at a sister state agency, Department of Consumer and Business Services, to create this fund that would be funded with $5 million to really help affordable housing projects with insurance needs. Part of this bill's specific direction is that DCBS would be working with OHCS on rulemaking to really figure out the parameters of that program and like how much a reimbursement would be, who will qualify for reimbursement. So it is a perhaps small but an important step in really trying to help with those insurance needs. This bill also is currently in Ways and Means. Senate Bill 48 is one that I'm just going to briefly touch on, and then this is definitely one that if anybody has questions, I will go back to our legislative coordinator who is working on it and provide additional information. But Senate Bill 48 is making changes to the Moderate Income Revolving Loan Program, otherwise known as MERL. And there was a bill in a previous session, Senate Bill 1537, that established MERL. This is really trying to make some changes to make Merle a much more efficient program that we can operate. It also is in Ways and Means, and I know that there's a lot of interest in Merle. So this one, I have no doubt when we come and do an end of session update, this is one that will give some more detail. But for today, I'll just let you know it's also in Ways and Means, and it is also one that we're working with the governor's office on. And then lastly, House Bill 3090. It is a bill that is allocating $16.9 million for the Homeownership Development Incubator Program, otherwise known as HDIP. Government relations, we put this on the slide just to let people know that homeownership is also something very important to our partners and others working over at the legislature. Partners asked to have this bill introduced. It is asking actually for an equivalent amount for the HDIP program as what is in the governor's recommended budget. But I think for advocates, they wanted to introduce this bill to really elevate this program to the legislature and also give legislators another option for funding HDIP, that they could either do it through our agency budget bill or that they could do it through this bill. And it was just a way to really, really elevate and have that program be in front of legislators' eyes. And as is true for all of the rest of the bills on this page, it also is in Ways and Means. These are the last of the bills that we're really working on a lot over at the legislature. Marissa, can we go to the next slide? And I will just say that they, just like our agency budget bill, will have to come in a future date to talk to you about what has happened to them, because these are the last of the funding decisions that the legislature is making regarding housing. So I just wanted to say that was an incredibly quick overview of some of the things that we are continuing to work on over at the legislature, and to leave you with this, that we will come back in next month, I think it is, to do an end of session review to let you know exactly what happened with all the policy bills and with our agency budget. So with that, I'll just pause and turn it back to Chair Hall to see if there are any questions.
Okay, council, any questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace on this.
Or
Okay,
at least for another month.
yeah, until next time.
Until
All
next
right.
time.
Thank you very much, Jill. And now I believe we move on to the Affordable Rental Housing Division. And in a moment, I'll be convening the public hearing, and we will have public comment first. We do have a few people signed up for public comment. And again, I want to remind everybody there is a 3-minute limit. Time limit, and comments must relate to the specific transactions that are being considered today. So we are now convening a public hearing, and we'll be hearing first public comments in accordance with ORS 456.561. And the first name on the list of people who've signed up is Frida Walker. Is Frida Walker online? If so,
yes, I
please
am.
use.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Chair Hall, members of the council, and Director Bell. My name is Frida Walker, and I'm the Chief Compliance Officer at Self Enhancement, Inc. We are an emerging culturally specific developer. I'm here to express our gratitude for the multiple opportunities we've had to partner with OHCS. We are excited that OHCS has recommended funding for our 13th Avenue home ownership project. We just want to say thank you. And I would, my staff instructed me also to give a special shout out to Jessica and Talia.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Next on the list is Jack Mercer.
Chair Hall,
Jack,
I
if
do
you're
not see Jack Mercer on the list at this time.
okay. How about Peter Hoover? If you're
Yes,
online.
go ahead, Peter.
Okay.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you. My comments are more directed towards the ownership program as opposed to the rental program. So if you'd like me to speak now, that would be great, or later when you get to the ownership program, whichever the preference of the council is.
Well, I'll look to Director Bell for guidance possibly, but again, the public hearing is only on this topic, and we do not have a public hearing scheduled related to home ownership. But of course, as always, we're welcome to comments in writing.
All right, then
Okay.
I appreciate it if I could have 30 seconds of your time.
Okay, go ahead.
Just to express deep appreciation for all that OHCS and its talented staff and committed staff has done in support of the housing programs that Sisters Habitat for Humanity has engaged in. To let you know the direct impact of your programs and the services that you have provided, you have allowed our organization to multiply our housing production nearly 20 times from our historical average. And we could not have done that without the assistance and guidance and funding opportunities that were available through OHCS. And I'd also like to point out in the ownership section, the grant that you had, that the council or the committee has recommended for approval today, it was very critical to us that this is a phased project, and this recommended approval is allowing us to continue with and complete a project that we would have sunk a lot of money into infrastructure and would not have been able to capitalize on that investment without this follow-up opportunity. So my deep gratitude to all of you and to the staff of OHCS for what you've made possible here in Sisters. And I apologize if that was longer than 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you very much. And we've got a couple of more folks on the list. Again, a reminder that these public comments should be directed to the rental housing transactions we're looking at. Mr. G. Nassar.
I'm here. Thank you. My comments are, as Peter, directed to ownership. So I will just say thank you for all your support. Thank you for everything you do, and move on.
Thank you. And Robert Drake. Is Robert Drake online? If so, please use the raise hand on Zoom.
Okay, hold on here. Trying to find it. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and
Okay,
clear.
good. Thank you.
Mhm.
My comments will be very brief. I'm with the West Tuolumne Habitat affiliate based out of Forest Grove. And the Mills Lane project is unique for us. And there will be 11 units on the site. The homeowner is actually retaining her homeownership of the adjacent property. And this is in an established neighborhood. We've received strong support from the neighbors. And again, it's an opportunity for sweat equity to end up with 11 homes for people to help build and prepare for use. There's so much positive about it, and having your partnership actually gives me goosebumps. I've retired in my career, but spent over 30 years as a city manager and as elected official. And I'm still excited that I can get emotional and tense about the support and the leadership from Salem, the governor's support, and all of you helping make this happen, not only for people in Forest Grove, but around the state. And I think it's what makes us special as a state and as a region. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, but thank you for your support.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. And that concludes the list of folks we have signed up for the public hearing. So next up, transaction update. Assistant Division Director Ty Dunson-Strange.
Just a quick comment.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to say my appreciation for Bob Drake for all the work he has done in the community. Washington County, has been a key member of the community throughout his political life, throughout his social life, and continues through retirement. So thank you for all your work.
All right. Transaction update is Assistant Director Ty Dunson-Strange. Are you ready, sir?
Yes, Chair Hall,
Oh,
thank you, and Housing
oh,
Stability Council.
okay.
I appreciate all of the public comments and will
Mhm.
assume that I think all of the homeownership division folks watching are feeling the appreciation and excited to also hear talk about our affordable rental housing transactions and a bunch of different areas of work in the affordable rental housing division. So we have a couple approvals here first up, and they're a little different than ordinary ones. And actually, before we go straight into that, I did want to just do a brief record on the update on the record. Last month, Housing Stability Council had approved, I think it was last month, the El Nido 4% tax credit project. And it had erroneously listed that as a 30-year affordability period. It actually has a 60-year affordability period. So that is what is being implemented in that project. And that project is to provide 55 units of housing in Lake Oswego, and it's planned to close soon. And so with that, I will hand it to Ty, and this is a kind of a combination of projects versus a brand new one. So Ty, I will hand it to you, and I will get my screen sharing going.
Good morning, council members, Chair Hall, Director Bell. For the record, Ty Dunson-Strain, AD of Transactions, and here to present. In kind of picking up the theme of continuous process improvement, we are coming back to council to present kind of a combining of a transaction that was previously two separate projects. Willow Park and Sierra West, sponsored by the same sponsor, Bienestar, and was a team collaborative effort that Bienestar, the technical advisors, and the our preservation group identified, the possibility of having some cost savings and gaining some economy, thought appropriate to bring the transaction back. It's so now we're combining two separate projects to 101 total units, range of affordability, a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms. Both projects are located in Washington County. Just to note, this project in the packet, we list it as 30-year affordability, but in fact it is a 60-year affordability for that'll be on for the entire project. The project is slated to close in June, and there Bienestar. Next slide. Great. They're long-standing partner in the community, and a long-standing partner with OHCS, and committed to providing resident services for the Latino community, direct assistance, asset building, and health and wellness services. And they're also committed to reaching our MWSB participation rates for this project. With that, I'll open it up for questions. And I think the motion is, I think it's on page 5 of the packet. But happy to answer any questions.
See, Councilmember Rogers, I see your hand.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you
sorry.
for.
Yeah, I thought I was unmuted. Okay, Councilmember Rogers,
Thank
question,
you.
comment.
Thank you, Chair Hall. So, thank you for the presentation, Ty. So, I think I heard you say initially it was presented as two separate projects and now it's combined into one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
so
that's
yeah,
correct.
they were fine. We were brought them as two different projects, and then through the underwriting process, identified some efficiencies of combining those together to lessen the gaps that were showing in the budget. So it was so this is again has the same sponsor, and so putting those together on the transaction side to have the it financed as one to get some efficiencies.
Okay, good job underwriting. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, any other questions, feedback from the council? If not, I would like to entertain the motion on page 5 if somebody would like to make it.
I'll make that motion.
Alrighty, and is there a second?
Second,
All right, roll call, please.
One moment, Chair Hall.
Sure.
Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
No.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Willard,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan,
I'm going to abstain. I have not. I'm sorry.
thank you. Motion passes.
Wonderful. Next project.
Great. So next up, I have Assistant Director Amy Cole here to present a home art project, which was it's not technically through the ORCA at this point because this was initiated before. So again, a little bit of different things. So Amy, I'll hand it to you and share screen.
Great. Thank you, Natasha. All right. Good morning, Chair Hall, Housing Stability Council members, and Director Bell. I'm Amy Cole, Assistant Director of Development Resources, and I'm here this morning to present a Home American Rescue Plan, also known as Home ARP project, for your consideration. Okay, Home ARP was created through the American Rescue Plan in 2021, and its focus is on serving vulnerable populations. OHCS received about $32.8 million originally in 2022, and just recently received an additional $330,000, which we can use for projects, which is great. The total that we have for Home ARP altogether is $33.2 million. It needs to be expended by September 2030, and the focus that Oregon has put with the funding is on rural projects and to serve persons at risk of homelessness. There was a NOFA release for this funding in 2023. Through that NOFA, technical assistance was also provided, and projects were given 24 months to submit a full application. Next slide. So 3 projects decided to submit applications. Liberty Village, which was funded in early 2024 and is working toward financial closing. Manor Way, which is coming to you in just a couple of minutes. And Ellensburg Housing, which is moving through the ORCA process for additional funding. It applied for Home ARP and then needed a little bit of additional funding. So we'll bring that project to Housing Stability Council for consideration when that process is complete. All right, next slide. All right, Manor Way is going to be 30 units. All units will have rent assistance. It is sponsored by the Housing Authority of Malheur and Harney counties. It will be located in Ontario and is requesting 15 million in home ARP funding. Next slide. So the sponsor will remain focused. The application has stated that the sponsor will remain focused on prioritizing historically disenfranchised groups, including Hispanic, Asian American, and Pacific Islander community members, as well as tribal members. And they will do this through various approaches, including working with culturally responsive service providers, with bilingual staff members, hiring local community members with lived experience for resident services and peer support, and using data collection methods that are tailored to unique demographics, languages, and cross-border social structures that define communities and families in the region. And the next slide. All right, with that, the motion for your consideration is on page 10 of the packet, and we're happy to answer questions.
Any questions from council here? Well, I guess the presentation was so thorough that nobody has any questions. So let's see, we do have, as mentioned, the motion on page 10. And would somebody make the motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yep, just one moment. Thank you, Chair Hall.
Oh, sure.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Mary Farrell, Councilmember Farrell, sorry.
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
No.
Councilmember McCann,
It's me and I'm abstaining.
thank you, my apologies. Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Willard,
I have to abstain from this.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember DeFortum,
Councilmember DeFintorm is not present today.
oh, thank you for that.
Okay, so the final vote total, I guess we need yes, no, and abstentions.
I believe so.
Marissa, if you could summarize the yes, and then
Yeah.
I think just for the record, for Councilmember Willard, I believe you're abstaining for proximity for professional reasons. Is that right? Accurate?
That is correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, my apologies. I believe it was. I'm so sorry, I was doing that so quickly, I didn't record correctly.
Okay, well, shall we do it again?
Yes, that'd be great. My apologies for that. Okay. Councilmember Hall, or Chair Hall?
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
No.
thank you. Councilmember Tian, I'm sorry, so
It's
sorry.
okay. It's all right. It's my whole life. It's pronounced Mian, and
Mian.
I'm abstaining.
Abstaining, thank you. Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Willard,
I am abstaining.
could you say that again? I'm sorry.
I'm abstaining for professional reasons why.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay, by my count, that's 5 yeses, 1 no, and 2 abstentions. So it is a majority vote. So this is approved.
Correct.
That's correct. Thank you, Chair Hall.
Oh, Councilmember Farrell?
Just a quick question. Since we didn't have any conversation after the presentation, I was just surprised to hear a no. Is there room for any discussion after the fact, or that ship has sailed? I'm just trying to understand what the objection might have been.
Chair Hall, I'll defer to you, but I think the council is always deemed to have conversation as they
Of
see
course.
fit
Councilmember
consistently.
Lee, would you like to share the reason for your no?
Absolutely. My no had nothing to do with this project or any of the projects today. My no has to do with issues in front of this council that I believe have not been addressed. There's been a lack of transparency. I still require information. And the only way I know, I want to be present. I want to be participatory. And the only way I know to raise my objections is through a no vote. So that is what I'm offering. Thanks for asking, Councilmember Farrell. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, next up, we have Equality and Contracting Update. This should be a great presentation, and anytime the team's ready.
Great. Thank you, Chair Hall. I'm excited to have Love Johnson here to be able to share with you an update on our equity and contracting work. So Love, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure thing. All right. Let's do that. Okay, you can see my screen now? Okay, great. Chair Hall, Director Bell, members of the council, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Love Johnson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am serving in a new role within the Affordable Rental Housing Division, focused on stewarding our policies related to racial equity, including today, we're going to talk about our equity and contracting system, alternately known as MWESB. So I'm going to give you a little bit of update of some work we've been doing on our end with our partners, and then an overview of the data from our 2024 projects that we funded. So just a refresher and overview, the system that we have is intended to increase utilization of businesses owned by people of color, women, veterans, as well as emerging small businesses. Those are often certified by COBID, which stands for Certification Office of Business Inclusion and Diversity. That's the state agency that runs the programs. However, we also created a new pathway to allow for businesses that self-identify as such to be involved in our program, because we've heard from our partners that some businesses are either still in the process of getting certified, takes a while, or they're maybe not interested in getting certified for various reasons. So our partners have told us this is a really valuable pathway for them. And then taking a look at this map over here, we have 2 different goals for percentage utilization, different parts of the state. The Portland metropolitan area is 5 counties in orange here. Their goal is 30% utilization of these businesses, and the rest of the state has a goal of 20%. So first on OHCS's end, I just wanted to give you some updates of what we've been doing since we talked to you last. I'm excited that we have additional staff capacity for this work. So we've had a couple of folks helping build new systems and really manage a high volume of data that we get from our development partners. I'll take a moment right now to shout out Nicole Caldwell, Kranti Budatoki, and Stephen Cornwall, who've been just absolutely instrumental in this effort. So thank you to all of them. One thing we've done is updated the reporting template that our developer partners use to submit 3 reports to us throughout the construction process, kind of beefed up the instructions, made it a lot more functional and usable. And one way that we've done that is linked it directly to ProLink, which is our software system of record for all of our agency funding. So now there's some automatic linking in there. It really kind of streamlines the process for everyone and has made ProLink the home for our data. So that's been a long effort that's been underway for a while. We've also built some new tools. This tracker is available on our website. It tracks the performance of each individual project that is completed and under construction. So you can see kind of the final total numbers here in this column. We also split it out by business type, those 4 types that we just discussed. And you can also filter this sheet by developer or by general contractor. And so that can help development team partners kind of find other people they might like to work with. One of the more exciting updates I want to share with you is that we have some new funding to support this work. Starting in March of this year, we updated the ORCA to add some new funding for what we're calling contracting equity consultants. These are organizations that provide kind of technical assistance and services to help projects reach those subcontractors. So that's things like outreach, helping just identify firms that are COVID certified or eligible, kind of managing relationships, admin, and then helping with reporting as well on the back end, and similar strategies to help connect those businesses. So I'll talk a little bit about how this works in the ORCA and some of the other things we ask. As you know, the impact assessment is kind of the first major step of an ORCA application. So at this point, we ask for the project team's history of meeting goals like this, whether with OHCS or other funders, and we ask about successful strategies they've used in the past. We ask what steps they'll take on this project and then how they will solicit to firms. We ask them to upload some sample bid materials or other kind of marketing materials. And then this is the point at which they will signal interest in working with one of those contracting equity consultants. So then they move on to the financial eligibility step. At this point, they'll provide us a contract with those services, and we make sure we that those services match that list that we've described in terms of what those consultants can provide. And then they also list the funding amount up to that $60,000 in a special spot in their pro forma at this point. And so as of late last month, we've had about 7 of the 20 projects that have come in since March working with these consultants. So that's about 35%, which is exciting. Now I'm going to do just kind of a brief overview of the data from 2024. This is all available on our equity and contracting dashboard. It's a Tableau dashboard that you can find it linked on our webpage as well. So this will be kind of a speedy overview, but I encourage you to take a look there at your leisure if you are so interested. Just for some summary stats about the projects that we're talking about here. So in 2024, we had almost 60 projects that finished construction. That's over $1 billion of investment. The overall percentage utilization of those firms was about 28%. We also had another 68 projects that were still under construction at the end of 2024. And so I'm just going to focus on numbers for these completed projects today. But if you do want to go into the dashboard, you can see the numbers for the projects that were still under construction as well. And those numbers obviously change as the project continues to be built. So first, when we think about that 28% overall number, this is a pie chart just breaking it down by business type. So you can see that over half of the funds were spent with businesses owned by people of color, another almost 30% with women-owned businesses, about 18% with emerging small businesses, and then a small number for veteran-owned businesses. And then this is a chart showing the number of firms hired by race and ethnicity. Over here on the right, this is the number, just the numbers for 2024 projects. The bar charts here are actually showing you each year. So 2023, 2022, 23, and 24, you can compare across years. So you can see some steady progress for some groups, kind of less utilization of firms owned by Middle Eastern, North African folks, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander, and then people who identified as other or multiracial there. And then similarly, this is the actual contract dollar amounts that went to these types of firms. You can see kind of Hispanic or Latino owned firms at the bottom, kind of having the highest numbers, and then followed by Black and African American owned firms, and Asian, American Indian, and Alaska Native. So kind of similar numbers and some progress as well for this year. Finally, numbers wise, I just wanted to share the total number of subcontractor firms that project teams worked with in 2024. Almost 200, about 250 of them were certified by the COVID office, and then another almost 200 were self-identifying as meeting those criteria, but not being certified by the office. This chart on the right here shows the split of the business types. So I'll note that some businesses are certified as multiple types. So these numbers are a little different than that total over there. But you can see we had the most emerging small businesses, pretty closely followed by minority business enterprises, women business enterprises, and then again, a small number of veteran-owned businesses. Just want to show you a few more things that are available on the dashboard for you all to check out, as well as anyone, members of the public and project partners. We've kind of refreshed our list of organizations that serve small businesses and construction workforce organizations. We have also updated our subcontractor directory. So this is a long list of subcontractors organized by the type of work they do, the business type, and then what region they serve. So finally, that was a brief update, but you're more than welcome to go dive into the data if you like on the dashboard, and then all these things are available on our website as well, and links to more resources and things of that nature. So I think that's my time. I will be more than happy to answer any questions.
All right, council, questions? Comments, discussion?
Chair Hall, oh, yes, please.
Yeah, Councilmember Rogers, followed by Councilmember Meehan.
Thank you, Chair Hall. And thank you for this presentation. The data is exciting. I'm glad to see that it's in a easy format to follow, where we can actually visually see the progress, and it's exciting. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Councilmember Meehan.
I just wanted to echo Councilmember Rogers' appreciation for the work that is put in. I see that I like how your databases that can be organized or searched through for different contractors or the different businesses. I think that's going to be helpful. And I'm kind of at a loss for words. I feel like this is I don't really understand where we're at and where we're going from this point with this tool. So that's all I have to say. I said for the record.
Thank you.
Director Bell, is that anything you'd like to address?
Well, I don't know about address, but here's a couple of things. Thank you, Love, for this and all of the folks that helped make this possible. There's a couple things that I think that I have been thinking about in terms of some of the conversations that we've had with council around equity and racial justice, around contracting, around ensuring that we are not only collecting data, bringing the data here, having the right lines of questioning, and then figure out what we do to move the needle forward. This is not going to be a fully organized thought, so I'll try to at least consolidate my thinking. So the council is aware that housing and equity exist beyond policy and program. So the moment that there are contracts established, the process by which different contracts are established to facilitate the building process all matters. It all matters in terms of how it's built, who's building it, and then where we are helping to expand the benefits of public investment in a way that's going to move communities forward, and in particularly looking at that with an equity and from a racial perspective in mind. So we are collecting and displaying all of this information to bring council into sort of closer visibility into what we are seeing, what the targets are, what people are, what we are trying to hold, partners to, and then what the outcome of that is. And so there's a couple of at least questions or curiosities I have from the council, and we don't have to identify them all in the moment. I think the first one is, I would be curious where the council might be seeing either vulnerabilities in the data that we have, not only in terms of how we are presenting, but what we are presenting. I think that's thing one. The other area of question that I have, which probably breeds a longer conversation, and I think importantly so, which is what are the lines of questioning that we need to deploy as we're looking at the data? And so what I mean by that is, I think it is really easy and cushiony to get more money and say, we're doing a good thing. And we are doing a good thing. I'm not suggesting that none of this is not a good thing, but it is easy to say, we've got more money, we're doing more things. Great, that all means progress. And I think we're seeking to hold ourselves to a higher set of standards in terms of really looking at the details. And so I think where I would really appreciate council's either questions, critique, and or just thought partnership is just in that, in terms of the data that we are collecting, in addition to how we're presenting it, where there might be vulnerabilities in our thinking, or where we might need to push our own learning edge. I think that's one. Thinking about the completeness of sort of the lines of questioning that we hold together as a council and as an agency as we're looking at the data. And then I think maybe it goes back to Councilmember Lee's earlier point, which is, how are we defining movement in progress when it comes to housing and equity? And so, again, those are not fully formed thoughts, but those are the things that I have been thinking about, and would, I think as we continue to bring this with greater regularity, I think want to make sure that, that the collection of the data and the presentation is the point. The big deal is what the outcome is, and what the outcomes that we're trying to facilitate, not just the visualization of it, although it's really important to have it because we didn't always have it. So Chair Hall, I appreciate the patience with my maybe a little bit rambling, but those are sort of the thoughts that I've been thinking about related to this.
Okay, Councilmember Farrell.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, both the original question and that summary of thoughts. I guess I just still hope that this council can come together to have that conversation and just help the agency identify what some of those key points that we want to keep an eye on might be. Is that still possibly going to happen? I mean, we've talked about it, but
Yeah,
haven't like arrived at a, like, here's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, I think we'll need to maybe circle back. Director Bell, you and I probably need to have a conversation offline to look at exactly how to facilitate that.
Yes, and I think if there are specific areas that council members, I don't think they need to be fully formed ideas, but I think we're talking about it now. And so I think if there are specific things that we can just move on to say, this is the conversation we need to have it and how we need to have it, because I think there's a lot that that is possible, and ultimately, I think ultimately I want to make sure that we aren't driving that the council can help shape that. And so I'm open to that now, and I think whenever, but I think the fact that we have this data now feels like at least a starting place to start poking holes, critiquing, thinking about our own trajectory. So in whatever manner the council individually or collectively sees that envisioning, then I think we can do that without much building out or waiting several months to do it. So however the council sees that fit to happen, we'll be responsive to do that.
Okay. Councilmember Farrell?
I would just wonder if there are any data points that other council members would like to see that sort of weren't included in that original. Like, is there anything missing or that we would want to be tracking?
Well, apparently not, at least at this. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry.
There's a couple,
Councilmember
yeah.
Meehan, Councilmember Mania after.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you, Councilmember Farrell. That's definitely something I was just thinking about. taking a look at this database. There's a lot in there, and some of it's not real clear to me what the measuring stick is, but there's definitely, I was going to ask, are there plans to add more different criteria or different or other things to this database? It looks like it has a lot of possibilities to bring some numbers together for the target areas, and as well as from the builders to the people that it's serving, that kind of thing. So that was my question.
Well, maybe I'll jump in initially, and then Love can opine as she sees fit. I think Councilmember May, my initial thinking is, like many of our data collection efforts to help measure effectiveness of our work, not only the work that's prescribed to us in specific terms, but the work in which we're trying to move our state forward, particularly from an equity perspective, from a race and equity perspective. I think that councils can generate those ideas and direction for us. I think we can collect and visualize probably into perpetuity. I think we would accept any thinking idea that you might have from your own perspective or from the council's perspective around the story that it's telling. I think the questions that we need to critique, and then I think also, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the trajectory of where we're trying to go with all of this. And so I think if we need to spend more time on it to generate those ideas, I think that's one place to start. I don't want to put words in council's mouth, but if it feels like we need to go a little bit deeper in order to, inform questions, thoughts, direction, then we can absolutely do that either on an individual level or either have a separate conversation just to really get into the details like we have at different moments. So I think there's a range of possibilities, and we'll leave the council to shape that.
Thank you, Director Bell. And I think that that's definitely something that that's where I'm thinking about. Like, there's a lot here, and also with the uncertainty again, how we're going to be able to use this information to move housings, affordable housings forward in this state. I'm still, I feel up in the air about that. I just want to know what need some concrete answers or some form of direction on what's relevant and what's going to be usable and what's not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'll just offer this one last thing, Chair Hall, before I yield, and I'm sure there's others that want to jump in. Sure, there's absolutely, to your point, Councilmember Meehan, a lot of evolving points, many of which are out of our control across the world. Our work is going to continue. What we hold ourselves accountable to, we're going to continue to do that. We are going to continue to move our race equity work forward. That's the non-negotiable. That's what we're continuing to work towards. And so starting from that place of certainty, I think there's a range of possibilities.
Yes, that to me is the bottom line as well. The work will continue. Even if we have to figure out new ways, we will make sure the basic work continues. Anybody else want to weigh in at this point? Councilmember Mania.
Thank you, Chair Hall. So to me, there are a couple of things that that we track on this work. One is to ensure that minority contractors and women contractors are actually able to benefit from the investments that the public is making, and that this benefit or their participation increases as time goes on. And subsequent to that, as to how it can increase, and the other measure that I think I'm very interested in, and it's very challenging because of how we track things, but it is, are we increasing that capacity? And if we are, where are we increasing, and where would you need to increase? I know that the major trades, the major components in construction are very, at least my perception, I don't know, are very limited to a couple of different contractors that are big contractors that can perform and give the developers a big percentage that they need. And are we able to actually increase that capacity and bring other subcontractors that can do that work or break it down and things like that? That's an area that I'm very interested in, is all this work. Are we increasing capacity in this, within this contractors? Along those lines, I'm also interested in the labor force and what is that labor force made up of, and especially on the unionized labor, and are there discrepancies within that, and what are we doing about that? Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Willard.
Chair Hall, I would just like to say that I am part of this OHCS MWESB group. And I want to let Love know that you have done a lot of hard work with this, a lot of hard work with the tool. And I am very impressed with all of the cleaning up that you had to do, because there has been a lot of data that was just mixed data. And some thoughts that I could share is right now, I feel like everybody is in the state of not knowing the unknown. And especially with everything that has to do with MWESB. But one thing that I can say is I am super proud to be an Oregon resident because we are furthering these goals and we are furthering equity and racial justice in this area. But I do also agree with what Councilmember Mena is saying is how do we increase minority women-owned businesses to do further contracting in the state of Oregon rather than having to go with bigger contractors. I do believe in the mom and pop shops that should be part of this, part of being able to participate in what we do, in the work that we do. Always even keeping it local. That is something that is extremely important, especially in rural counties. It's always extremely important to keep things local. Because you are actually helping out your community in the long run. So, but I'm not here to get on my soapbox. I just wanted Love to know that I appreciate the work that you've been doing. I appreciate you convening these meetings and jumping in when positions were switching. And so just keep up the good work, Love. And I'm very excited and happy to be a part of this group. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I'll echo. I appreciate all the data that was shared, and this is, I think, on a really good path in terms of, at least this is the most I've seen in terms of information regarding MWESB. I did have a question, or I guess a recommendation. Is I was looking at the members of the working group that helped with this, and I was curious if there's any conversations with any general contractors who we see again and again being contracted for these projects, and understanding any hurdles that they're running into in terms of subcontracting and what that looks like from their perspective, because I think there could be an opportunity to help with capacity building there, or and making sure that we understand what that looks like, the implications from a cost perspective, right? Like we want to do this work, but if it's prohibiting projects from being built because the labor market is so tight in some areas, what we can do to help with that process.
Yeah, and I will maybe kick it off, Love, and maybe you'll have some other thoughts to add. And I think just reflecting the conversation in terms of the way that we make the meaningful progress is by starting to get better at measuring it and seeing the information, bringing the right stakeholders together. And I think that is what you are seeing, at this, come to you here. And that's work that has been built over, several, at least a few years at this point in time, where we've been, start with kind of a generic, something relatively generic, begin to understand it better, begin to put measurements in place. And now we have systems in place where that is all tied together. And I think that's the place where we are able to see the impact of that work. We are also I think Love is convening groups, and she will be able to certainly speak to more of that if there's interest there. But I think then also, having all of the direct conversations with those that are want to be funded to build projects, or are all ready and are, and I think the next topic I have to talk through is our ORCA updates and where we're thinking around, how are we seeing and continuing to measure the impact of change and moving from NOFAs to ORCA to the ORCA process. And, and I think in all of that, having really deliberate conversations with those intersections that are impacted. And, some of the, business development is not an OHCS, our central business, but certainly we are working with our enterprise connected systems with Business Oregon and others who are where those roles really do rest, and the pressure needs to, to be able to invest in all of those different workforce development strategies is centered. And so I think there's a bunch of efforts in that, but I think, they're all in different areas and places. But I think, just like you're saying, Council Member Harris, it's it's not just looking, measuring is not the end goal. The end goal is also trying to understand all of those places where we can support and empower expansion, and into the state and the economic systems of local communities, layered with the where do you need to have buildings really built and don't have that workforce present. I think another piece of it also becomes where is the place of other policies that have impacts on subcontractors and their ability to do work in projects where the kind of business standard becomes not reasonable or viable. But yeah, so I think I appreciate all of the discussion around that, and I think we'll continue to invest in this core work and make sure. I think part of Love's role specifically is really to look at how can we better measure the impact of our policies and understand where they are successful. So I think, just thrilled to have Love stewarding all of those pieces together. And I think we'll continue to be able to see more ways that we are measuring, which gives us more opportunities to see what is and what is not the best effective effort.
All right. Councilmember Meehan?
Thank you, Chair Hall, and thank you, Natasha, for bringing up the stakeholders, and I'd love to throw that plug in here that now that it's all said and done, having that follow up and seeing how things shake out. So with the contractors, as Councilmember Harris was speaking of, and the people that are doing the work and how it's impacting them after the fact and what's going on. What does it look like now that we've said and done it? So thank you for this work. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and Chair Hall, I might just offer, I don't think it is necessarily said and done. I think this is the starting place of where we are at, and we're going to continue to track and talk about the data and assess it and critique it and keep pulling folks. So I just want to honor, not to sort of oversimplify your words, Councilmember Meehan, but I just want to stress that it is enduring as opposed to fixed. And so this topic will come with some level of regularity, with updates and other opportunities, at least from us to the council to engage, but also if there is interest from either any of the council members to have a much more in-depth briefing or get into any of the details, we're always open to do that, and appreciate all the conversation to date about this topic in its initial form.
Okay. Anybody else from the council wish to weigh in on any aspect of this at this time? Well, say that we'll pause the conversation, not end the conversation, because we know that this is ongoing work, and we'll get ready to hear the ORCA update now.
Great. Thank you, Chair Hall, and I will switch to my share screen. So I can't remember, a couple months ago, we started the process of adding an ORCA update into the Housing Stability Council packet as a place to be able to show what's going on and also explain it at the same time. So not everybody needs to be masters of all the things to interpret the tables of data. Data is great, but it doesn't speak to everyone in the same way. And so wanting to make sure that we can put some of our thoughts to it. Included in this month's update is, a discussion around the places and ways where we see opportunity for a mid-year update to bring into the space. And I think want to start this off by saying, the ORCA has been implemented about a year. It is one of the primary ways that we are really seeking and striving and I think having real impact in advancing housing progress. It is intended and is directed to be able to both boost housing supply, as well as doing that local investment in communities, to make sure that there are tools available to be able to do the work in community. And I think, and also in a space where we have evolved from the big competitions to trying to have communities and organization plan and steward their work forward, in a place where there's better predictability, than in seasonal competitions. And so wanting to make that known, next month we will be bringing an ORCA retrospective document as we look back on this last year of work, but we see that we funded thousands of units, and across all communities across the state. We have, though, we are looking at the wrap up of this biennia. Over the last several months, we've been talking about this place where we are looking to adapt ORCA to be able to add any new legislative investments that we are lucky enough to get, and then make sure that we can leverage all of the robust pipeline of projects that have already been evaluated to meet standards within the process. And so are looking at, so this is looking at an introduction of a sort of these topics here, really interested in getting your feedback so that we can bring that back. And I think what we are aiming to get and do through these updates is to, establish clarifications, including around readiness, increase transparency, make sure that we are adding other places and ways to see better for those navigating our work externally, continue to keep a production focus, and really put a finer point on our investment strategies to prioritize rural communities. Over the last year and more, we have gotten a lot of different partner feedback, I think in explicit and targeted conversations, in a lot of questions and feedback means there are hundreds of questions and answers that the teams have been tracking and doing. There are all of the both technical advisor work as well as the application processes. And then earlier this year, we went through our qualified allocation plan process, where we also were able to take in a lot of ORCA feedback around there. On Monday, I did a walk through these updates and change recommendations, potential recommendations with partners in a Zoom meeting, and also are gathering information from there and having lots of deep conversations with community. So I've kind of like synthesized these into themes here, in terms of what we are hearing and how we are and there's lots of different comments, but have rounded them into these themes. And so I think there's a set that I have kind of categorized as waitlist and pipeline concern. Again, I think wanting more transparency from the waitlist, as we have established commitment to launching the ORCA and continuing to evaluate and revise as we move forward. One of the places that we were new to was having a waitlist. And I think as we established that waitlist, and got navigating all of the questions, have built a really robust set of policies and documentation around that I think is an opportunity to bring more visibility to, as well as to find, as we talk to folks, different ways that might help them understand and be able to navigate their work with more clarity around where and when resources would be potentially available to support their projects. We have a concern around the two project limit per sponsor in the ORCA. I have a discussion a little bit later on this. And that 2 project limit is intended to, I will save that discussion for a minute, so I don't want to duplicate myself. And then a concern that the first come, first reviewed process leaves viable projects behind those. I think first I would like to push back on the assertion that it's first come, first served. It is really reviewed. All projects need to meet ORCA standards, so we are evaluating them based on a very intentional strategies that we have, built in this space and done that. So it's not who can go fastest gets money first. It is who is applying, putting all of their information together, able to demonstrate that they are going to meet all of our policy requirements, all of our timeliness, and all of our readiness requirements. So I think that that is a place of some education and learning, but it is also a piece where I think what the other piece of that comment is really where there was, still is some comfort with the strategy where a project can apply for resources and compete and either go or no go. The place where there is some adaptive learning that is happening around what is the experience and what is the pattern. Being on a wait list isn't a familiar pattern, and so trying to push and find ways around that. And I think those will be discussions that I'm going to continue to have as we move forward, because I think there's opportunity there. I think there's also really understanding how is it that we, how will this impact and kind of change perspectives over time, and where are we going to find that we still have more work to do to continue to evolve this. I say there's a perception that ORCA doesn't track milestones in the development process. And I think what we have not been able to do yet is turn on an externally facing visibility on those milestones. There are established milestones in every phase of the development. There's 3 stages of the ORCA process. We have our impact assessment, which is where we're looking at those policy elements. And then coming out of that, we go into a financial eligibility. And so there's lists of key diligence. There's a maximum time that you're able to take for that. And then after you've completed those, you go into the commitment stage where you then have other milestones. And those are all pieces of the process and the work that we are actively tracking. We have we call PA anyway, the project teams that are specifically the production analysts that are assigned to projects, and they are examining and tracking all of that work of development processes. And so part of what, again, in a commitment to increasing visibility and transparency, we are working to still figure out that place where we can be saying, having external information available about, some of those major milestones and where there are projects that are meeting them, where they are not. And then also, ideally, where are those disconnects happening? Because often it is not an OHCS process. Often it is not, well, it's usually, often it is not even the developer's process. It gets hung up in a local issue, or a NIMBY issue comes up, or all of a sudden the materials are no longer available. So there's all of those pieces of complexity that is the puzzle of getting a project both initially financed and then developed and built. And so, continuing to lean into those, I think there's a perception of lack of flexibility. I think, when we are establishing the ORCA, we were intentional around wanting to say, our priority should be getting the resources to community and getting those projects and those units built. And so we're investing our time in not the competition, but in the projects. And there is inherent need for collaboration in that. And we need to hold standards. So I think those are 2 pieces of it. Our policies to hold standards also give us the ability to be responsive when the unique or the challenge comes up. We have, there are, policies and ways that we are allowing the request to, this is going on, what is it? And so that the production analyst has the ability to get that information, what's going on, and then we're able to bring that into a place where we can have some diligence around making sure that we are treating projects comparably across all of them in this network of I always think there's like a million, you can't have one standard project experience. There's always, all of those touch points are always really unique and different across them. And then looking at a funding process with an iterative structure for the financing, I think trying to find ways where we can better let projects come in where we are able to piecemeal across different resource types or shift and change. And I think we have done a lot of that, but not all the way, in terms of there's tax credit projects and non-tax credit projects, those structures and those applications, and honestly, some of the requirements from the funding source are different. So I think we're, continue to be interested and improving those connections, but are also seeing that. I also think there's a part of the ways in which we can be thinking around the different tools that we need to add to our ability to deliver financing, where we see market shifts and change. We need to be responsive as a public partner to ensure that there's all strategies activated, especially as we navigate challenging development climates, which this is absolutely one of. Rural communities, we have a deeper rural community discussion a little bit later in this presentation. The concern that first come, first reviewed process is favoring the more well-resources, those organizations that can move forward swiftly over the other. I think that's part of that 2-project limit. I think there's also part of this that, again, these are projects that need to meet standards, so there is inherent value within. And then, seeking, there's, some voices who are absolutely expressing wanting more direction and more specific areas that the state will establish or adopt to be able to invest in, and to be able to, have that more specificity, again, wanting OHCS to adopt strategies that are more specifically targeted or nuanced. And I think that is, I would take it as a point of comment. In terms of looking forward at the update potential recommendations to bring forward through Housing Stability Council, I think these are built in response to a lot of these feedback themes that we have heard. It is also built to be responsive to strategies and understandings that we are seeing as we're evaluating the way that this is working, and where is it meeting our initial policy intent? Where are we needing to make some adjustments? Where is it that we are, as we are establishing it, seeing places where we need to do these refinements? And so I think that there are a bunch of these strategies that are really core improvements in the work, as we are, again, have committed to continuing to revise where we see things that are either needing more clarity, more explanation, more transparency to them, or needing a revision in a policy to make sure that unintended impact doesn't continue or exacerbate or become the primary impact of our work. So there are 7 listed through here. I'll walk through each of those 7, and I think we'll, for time, I presume I will continue through them, and then pause for conversation later, but certainly, or maybe there's a rural conversation, so maybe we'll pause there, but otherwise certainly welcome any feedback as we go back to work to incorporate and understand all of the comments that we are receiving, and including most certainly with Housing Stability Council.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So so clarifying readiness, I will not belabor these. You see the words on the screen. I think we are, I think I was talking about, there's these phases of work with ORCA. The first impact assessment application, when you submit that is when your application is given a time. So that's given the place where it is submitted. Those projects are then evaluated. Do they meet standards? We have documented what that process is for remedying areas where we don't have clarity or need more information. So there's a remedy process that's all defined and established within that. And then we bring to Housing Stability Council if there's resources to be able to fund the project. After impact assessment, it goes into the financial eligibility, where we need some key documentation and information finalized so that we can be formalizing our financing for the project and moving it into a commitment stage. So there's a bunch of items within that time period, and that is not a new application. So that is a continuation of our funding of the project. And I think this is a place of adaptive learning connected to this all, where we are, have found that in the ORCA work moving forward, projects in financial eligibility. Candidly, projects have been successful in meeting their timelines. And the production team has done a really, did a big lift to really try to elevate and make clear the process within that. And I think in that work of navigating these first cohorts of projects in financial eligibility, we've seen that there's some of these kind of earlier checkpoints that are really important to be able to add to it. There's a need for more visible transparency on what those bodies of work are. So wanting to make sure that we're providing some external visibility about those. I think there's some updated, communication materials and tutorials that we will do. And then establishing within that period, again, it's not, don't wait 6 months to click submit. It is, why don't you should be working and sharing and demonstrating progress throughout, and establishing that midway through, we will be checking in. So the production team will check in by that point, if they haven't already, to just ensure that there is good understanding about the work to remain, or their critical issues that are coming up. And I think those are conversations we were already open for, but again, structuring it as a base expectation is where we're considering that potential recommendation. Leverage test. This is, as we were launching the ORCA, talked about the, a system of our different various cost controls. There were some orbits that I, talked about and described. I think underneath the subsidy controls, one of the things that we have noted over the last year or two really of our financing work is that an increasing percentage of development budgets are being funded through subsidy, loans, grants, or otherwise. And I think as we see that, I think I can't take the ORCA in isolation. These are also the times where we see increasing costs of construction, decreasing tax credit pricing, increasing interest rates. So there's all of these really complex factors on top of rising construction costs. So, and, costs of staff and all of those pieces. So I think I don't see the that higher, the increase of that average as indicative explicitly of a issue with the ORCA structure, but that it is really representative more broadly of the market shift and change. But as we do that, really want to ensure that we're putting all of our intention to wanting to make sure that we are leveraging resources wherever possible. And so that the strategy here is to be asking more curious questions. And so where we are seeing projects with that really high percentage of their overall development budget derived from subsidy, having them demonstrate that they have evaluated and sought other resource and leverage wherever possible. And so again, building that documentation as a place of, again, just wanting to ensure that we are understanding the why and structuring that into our process. I think part of the so many of the great conversations I've had in deep dives on ORCA impacts, I think, as we establish our standards, there are less of the curious questions that are connected to points. And so wanting to make sure that we are continuing to invest in those curious questions, I think, in some strategic ways to make sure that we are building the body of work. I think another area, for instance, I think connected to our last conversation, ensuring that we will also, we'll also be adding more questions around how are you choosing your contractor and what are their connections to community? And as ways, again, to prompt the applicants to know that we care about that and that we want to understand it and we want to see that reflected in their work, even through a standard process that where we're not performing to a score, but we're performing to performance, and that is how we relay and establish our values. Gap only project size limit, I think, tied again, we want to make sure that we are leveraging resources wherever possible. When we first launched the ORCA, tax credits were not available. The private activity bonds were oversubscribed. That's done. We are through that pipeline. We've just have a cohort of 2025 projects, and we'll be putting more resources out with any legislative investment to be able to fund projects into 2026. And so while we didn't establish any firm boundaries around where we would see reasonability to projects receiving full financing through GAP resources that don't have tax credits in it. We now have 9% application processes moving forward. Next month, I'll be able to share the projects that were identified through that 9% selection process to move into our impact assessment. And now we want to make sure that we don't continue to build a pipeline where we have really large investments into gap-only projects that could be good fits for tax credit leverage. So, and I think for those less close and excited by the financing structure of it all, when there is a tax credit, the tax credit brings you an equity investor. So somebody who's bringing you upfront money to help build and operate the building. And I think there's different rules of thumb about what percentage of the development budgets those tend to cover. I imagine I need to get a refresh on what they look like today with the current pricing, but generally in a tax credit project, the rule of thumb has been those resources, that equity that you get from the tax credit should cover around 30% of project costs, and on 9%, it's about 70%. So thinking about that as where we want to be orienting and focusing the larger projects that could be good fits for getting a commitment from an equity investor. We also looked at all of the data of projects that have been coming in through the ORCA to make sure that we are seeing where seem like an efficiency tip. And so where are we seeing that project investments are significant enough and large enough to get equity investment, and where are we seeing that kind of modeled out? And so with that in mind, we have our potential recommendation here is to have a $35 million cap on the amount of resources that we would be putting into one project as a gap only without tax credit investment. And further, that when the project is, even if it is under 35 million, if it's over 50 units, again, asking the question, have you considered tax credits? Why are you not? Or is that something that you would want to do? And so wanting to make sure, again, that we're asking those questions. And I will add here in the note on the slide as well, I think in adopting any policy change here, we are intending and will honor and retain the waitlist placement and all of the work that has been happened to date. So we'll honor those. I think also want to ensure that those projects where they are large investments have opportunity to shift over to 4% if that's something that they are able to demonstrate ability to do. So that would, again, be questions, won't be a hard requirement, but that'll be a place where we are curious in those discussions. Let's see, and then geographic set-asides. And so I think we're going to use this as a launching off point to be able to bring a couple other voices. I have Mitch Hanush and Megan Bolton here to go do a little bit of a deeper dive on the rural conversation. I did want to just kick it off with a reminder that earlier this year, we did an update to be able to incorporate tax credits in the QAP and in the ORCA. And as part of that, we had a lot of discussion with Housing Stability Council as well as partners about focusing the culturally specific organizations set aside, which has been both culturally specific organization and rural, but focusing that set aside of the organizational type set aside on just CSOs, and then realize that what we really needed to do to be able to accomplish that is have a concerted rural strategy as we look at regions and the geographic areas. And so that's the discussion that we're focusing on today. I did, though, before I hand it to them, wanted to take just a minute to remind us all about the why of that culturally specific organization set aside. And I think I think as a good reminder, and also because we have received a lot of stakeholder comments that really show a lack of understanding and awareness of both the reasons why culturally specific organizations should have a set aside, as well as the strong performance and critical work in housing that culturally specific organizations do. So I think the why is that we are wanting to prioritize culturally specific organizations to acknowledge and be responsive to the fact that CSOs have lacked historic investment and connections to systems of finance, very explicitly in housing finance, and that has disadvantaged and disconnected organizations that are intentionally led and responsive to cultural communities that have both been historically underserved and overrepresented in all areas of poverty. So the set aside is to hold clear access to these organizations that have lacked investment. It is not organizations that don't have capacity and don't have very important, reliable efforts to do and lead and drive the work to serve communities. And so I think with that, I will hand it off to Mitch and Megan to drive us into the conversation today, which is really around these regional set-asides as we are looking to make these evolution for the work.
Thanks, Natasha. Good morning, Council, Chair Hall. My name is Mitch Hanoush. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst for the Affordable Rental Housing Division, and here with Megan Bolton, Director of Research. I'm gonna give a brief overview sort of what's changing or what we're proposing changing and why around the rural set-aside, and then Megan's gonna help provide some context and detail for the rural definition adjustment that we're proposing that will impact what those set-asides become. As Natasha mentioned, sort of just as a starter for this conversation, and as you all remember, when we were launching the ORCA, one of the kind of concerns we had with this non-competitive rolling process was that certain communities and organizations might be disadvantaged by that prioritization of readiness and maybe would take longer to get applications in, and wanting to make sure that we were really intentional about holding resources so that those folks would have the opportunity to come in and access funding, as well as some of the more sophisticated urban organizations or more organizations with more experience and capacity. So the CSO set aside was critical to that. We also had the rural nonprofit set aside as critical to that. Rural communities experience a lot of challenges with accessing resources as well. And one of the thought processes behind linking the two of those as a set aside off the top was because of that. We thought they experienced similar challenges, but distinct challenges from necessarily the geographic regions that we were holding set-asides for previously. So as you remember, our regional allocations currently were distributed by 3 regions after that sort of 25% off the top for those organizations. And that was Metro, Eastern, and Western, which were mostly just looking at ONA regions from the state. The Oregon Housing Needs Analysis had specific regions, and we aggregated them sort of by west or east of the Cascades, and then the Metro region there. We saw, some successes, some challenges in that definition, and wanted to make sort of some updates there to address some of the concerns that came up as a result. I think primarily when it comes to rural, it was mostly that we didn't have a specific set aside for rural organizations. So we were not within those geographic regions targeting rural organizations beyond sort of some of the adjustments to criteria that we had. The evaluation criteria were adjusted for rural contexts, and we had higher subsidy limits for rural communities. So there was some prioritization happening, but there was no surety that resources would be held for those communities. So breaking apart the CSO and the rural nonprofit made sense to us, wanting to target rural communities and hold resources specifically just for CSOs is what we're proposing moving forward. I think, one of the kind of other impetuses to do this change was the feedback that we received. I don't know if impetus is a word, but I'm going to go with it. We had a lot of input from rural partners that the resources that were going to rural communities that we were reporting on were not actually reflecting their vision of what rural was. 32% of our resources this first year have gone to tracts that we had defined as rural, and folks on the ground were not seeing that, not seeing the impact of that. So wanting to kind of get to the core of that, in addition to creating this new set aside for rural, we kind of got with research. Research did some awesome outreach to kind of rural partners and got some feedback on this, and then kind of went back to the drawing board on our rural definition to try to create some more differentiation between what is truly rural, a community that is truly rural, versus some of the ones that might have been receiving more of these resources through this first year. So with that, I think I will hand it off to Megan.
Great, thanks, Mitch. Good morning, everyone. Council members, Chair Hall, Director Bell. My name is Megan Bolton. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Director of Research for OHCS. And very excited to kind of talk today a little bit more about the work we've been doing with both affordable rental housing, and have also started some conversations with home ownership as well to ensure we're being consistent across the agency and how we talk about some geographic nuances across the state. So I just also want to say that, really a lot of this for the research team, in terms of looking at rural urban definitions, I mean, we've been doing that for a long time, but as on my team, we have a housing economist, Brandon Schrader, who is fantastic and really was the primary author of our first State of the States housing report that was released in November. And during that process, he was really digging in more to rural urban definitions so that we could best understand the particular challenges and needs in different types of areas of the state. And we really started to find and appreciate the work done by the Housing Assistance Council, which is a rural advocacy and research organization, where they really look at a number of things from housing density to commuting patterns, et cetera, and kind of divide places based on tracts and based on some of those characteristics. So we really built out sort of a model for Oregon based on that criteria. And in that model, they actually have, like 5 categories: urban, inner suburban, outer suburban, small town, and rural. And that we can split the state into those kind of 5 categories and really see some differences there, which is pretty interesting. What gets challenging, so that's from a research perspective, right? That's great for us as a research team. We can look at needs and we can have that level of nuance. Sometimes when we have to translate those things into funding mechanisms, it gets less nuanced, and we have to be a little bit more cut and dry and concrete, and sort of sometimes in the case of the original ORCA, like the kind of how it first rolled out, a little bit binary. So we really had to kind of find just a rural urban split. And we went with kind of grouping the rural, small town, and outer suburban group into the rural category, and then the inner suburban and urban into that urban category. There were some other changes that some other adjustments we used, again, based on commuting patterns and sort of the metropolitan nature of the counties they were in. But that was kind of the divide. And I think certainly we, through engagement and through conversations and feedback, heard some concerns about that split, where we made that split. So we are proposing some changes here that I think will really, it starts to take advantage of more of the nuance we have in the original definition. And I think really focuses in on particularly those small town and rural parts of the state where the housing density is at 64 units per square mile or fewer, right? So it's really making that its own kind of distinct bucket that is that rural bucket. And then including and sort of adding in what we're now calling sort of a small city. We're really struggling with the name for this one. Right now it's small city suburban, but the truth is those inner suburban tracts are actually in the urban areas. So it's more of those outer kind of exurban areas that are, again, much less dense. So it's really that sort of more exurban small city areas are now as their own kind of bucket. The metro, as we did before, sort of just stays. The 3 metro counties are going to sort of stay as their own region. And then you have now these non-metro urban areas that are your larger, sort of denser cities throughout the state, like Albany, Eugene, Salem, Medford, et cetera. And then even some of the denser downtowns for some of even the smaller cities. So that's that's kind of what we're proposing. And I think, yeah, Natasha can go to the next slide. Apologies. So I think we see that this is needed when we actually look at the data on what we've awarded to date. So if you just looked at the sort of the three categories we had before, which was really that, again, the 3 counties in the metro region, and then urban rural split outside of the metro region, we did have 32% of funding and 27% of units going to the rural areas. But if you look at the next table, you can see that really almost all of that went to that what are actually sort of those exurban small city tracts, and that the rural, those sort of small town rural areas with the much lower density only got 2% of the funding in units. While, and this is what I think we were sort of like, well, I mean, what's the population there? Is it also quite small? Will we even have, does it make sense to make this cut? But it is 17% of the population. So it is, I think, the feedback is right on. And we want to make sure that those folks who, if they're coming into the queue, they're not like having to wait, behind all these kind of small cities to get that funding that we know we want to prioritize. So I think the next slide just shows our updated map. We're still working on this. I will say we've been moving pretty quickly to get a lot of these. We've just received some of this feedback and are working hard to make changes. So this isn't public yet. This is a draft map. We are still kind of working to make sure we have everything in order, but this sort of shows you what that'll look like. Still a lot of blue in the state, which is the rural, but you can see now that the purple is sort of the new category of those more outer exurban and small cities. You've obviously got the metro there in the 3 counties, and then the urban areas are a little harder to see right now when you can't zoom in, but are the yellow areas there. So this is, we will have a version of this that folks can, begin playing with and searching for their addresses and see where they fall and continue to be open to feedback. But we're feeling pretty good about this, and I think have had some positive feedback so far from folks, and maybe some continuing questions. But I think I'm hopeful that we're moving in a direction that makes sense. So I think that's it. Mitch, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Megan. And again, deep appreciation for all the work from the research team on this, and shout out to Brandon Trader for all of his work here too, our economist. So next steps for this, I think we are planning to use our existing methodology to make sure things are as consistent as possible with kind of our first approved launch of the ORCA framework. And that included, as you remember, some of the evaluation of the ONA current housing need, which includes underproduction and housing for the homeless, and then weighted with a housing cost burden for underserved households to try to differentiate by different underserved populations within that kind of ONA model. Then we will, as Megan mentioned, publish that draft map to the website, and we're working on that currently and hope to have that soon for folks. And then we will come back to you for approval, hopefully alongside other ORCA mid-year updates. We are very open to feedback. We want to hear from you all, but also from partners. Also, just want to state, that we acknowledge that this is not the panacea for getting all of our problems with funding rural Oregon fixed. I think this is a starting point that we think takes us on that path and helps really acknowledge those truly rural parts of the state a little better than we have previously. However, we do want to continue having and will continue having continued conversations around rural strategy, really intentionally thinking about the unique challenges there and ways that we can help support those communities in a really supportive way by conducting more technical assistance and targeting resources that make sense for those communities too. This is not the end of the conversation, but just sort of the next step. Yeah, pass it back to Natasha or do questions. What do we want to do now?
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. And I think, your last point, I just wanted to, connect back to the home ARP recommendations that you had before. Well, I guess it was a couple ago, but I think that was based on projects coming through. Again, we did initial capacity investments to serve, to help kind of create the or invest in that initial work to kind of build and the strategies and teams to create those project concepts. So I think we are, continuing to try different strategies and then see impacts of those, which is really exciting. And I'm wondering, and thinking just for time that I might go through the rest of these and then see if there's other, thoughts that folks want to add at that point. I think because we're close, the rest of these shouldn't be too long. Acquisition funding lane, as we had these conversations as we were launching ORCA, navigated an update into our LIFT program structure to allow us to be able to use the LIFT resources, which are really for new affordable units, to be able to acquire like new LIFT projects from the market where those resources, the financing got upside down and market owners were looking to find other strategies to have ownership and operation for projects that were not penciling any longer. And so we've done that in the LIFT program and find that the strategy of incorporating it into the new construction pipeline just doesn't work. Also, it doesn't give us real intentionality about how much of our agency resources are we going to put to those strategies versus new construction. And so this shift is adding an acquisition lane. Depending on what happens in legislative session, there is also a bill that would align to this. So I think we are, I'm hopeful that bill will pass, but also, I don't know, but that seeing also that shared need. We understand the need to be thinking about those differently and also to identify where our resources should be used for that use. Resource allocation policy, I think this is an evolution as we have worked in the ORCA space. Earlier this year, as we were seeing that there were resources that were insufficient to be spent across all of these different buckets, we used our rights within the ORCA to have a leadership decision to pool those and spend, I think it was all within the framework. But now that we've practiced that, we know we want to memorialize it. And so finding the ways that we can be very front-end clear about how we now know we want to end up making choices as those goes through. And then I talked earlier in the feedback, there is a cap of 2 projects per sponsor per stage right now. And so that is, a total of 6 projects that a project could have active in our financing and development at a time. And I think that cap functions in a lot of important ways. One is to make sure that there isn't a gluttonous wait list that has 50 projects from organizations. And maybe that's an exaggeration, but it might not be. Also, so that it's an incentive, move your project forward into the next phase, then you can have another one added in. We are oversubscribed. We have more projects that we could finance than we have resources available. So saying that we should do dozens with any one entity when there are all of those project concepts around, I think still holds a lot of value. And I think that there are, I also see ways in which we can, refine and sophisticate this as we move forward. But I think in this moment with the thing that is playing a really important role, and where we're talking about organizations and their preservation needs, do not want to have an organization having to choose between moving a project that needs to be refinanced or recapitalized to be sustainable within their own organization, or that where they are seeing an opportunity to preserve a project that's expiring or needs a new ownership, not wanting that to compete with a new development effort. And so exempting preservation investments from that 2 limit conceptually made just a lot of sense. And so those are really that's just it. That's it. All the changes that we are looking at as we are looking at turning the page in terms of making this high level effort. I'm just going to flip back to the overall list. And so certainly, I don't know, Chair Hall, what you want to do for time, but I do, I think where there's thoughts on any of the topics, certainly, I think there's, rural, I think there's some key in the rural space, looking at broadening that, looking at 4 regions as a policy choice. I think we saw the why of that and how it was really identified. I think that's curiosity as we are thinking about doing this differently. And then, of course, any feedback over any of the rest of it, we would welcome.
Okay, council, anybody want to weigh in? Councilmember Rogers. And then Councilmember Lee and Councilmember Meehan, but Councilmember Rogers first.
Thank you, Chair Hall, Natasha and Mitch and Megan for all of this information and the update. Can you flip to the slide that has the new methodology where you were showing, it said 37%, but really it's like 2% for rural? Thank you. And so in the recommendation portion, I noticed that you were wanting to have a 20% set aside for CSOs, but you made a distinction that there are, like these 4 groups. So one, I'm kind of curious about, is that 20% set aside going to be refined among those particular groups? And then my other question is, I understand that initially the current set aside is like 25%, but if we didn't do a good job to start with, then why in the recommendation are we going down to say it should be 20%?
Yeah, and so this is, Mitch, I'll kick it off and you can fill in where I'm wrong or need more explanation. But I guess current set aside remains, it is culturally specific organization and rural development and development in rural communities. So it's a both factor. So, and that was established in large part because rural communities didn't have a geographic area. And so we're wanting to hold that. So the 25% included all of those. And I think in the way where an organizational typology is different from a geographic typology, it wasn't really working as intended in that vein, right? So there was the CSO set aside is intended to hold access to culturally specific organizations. So if regions are spent out, there are resources that ensure that there would have been sufficient, or not sufficient, but access to be able to get financing. And so I think that's the reason for the adjustment. So, but in order to focus that organizational set aside on just the typology of organization, we've just realized that we needed to really balance and put a stronger focus in the geographic set asides on rural, because obviously having that in a generic set aside that included those different ways of accessing it was not giving, very rural communities, truly rural communities, sufficient access. And I think that was both the definitional change where we're looking at those in different tranches, but then also the idea that it was doing 2 things before. And so we're focusing it differently. I don't know if that helps.
Okay, so then you're you said how the current one is saying calling out rural, but then the new potential one doesn't really say rural, but that's something that we're kind of trying to address.
So we are, so the off the top sort of is what we've been saying around that sort of culturally specific organization and rural set aside. So not looking at any of the geographies that we established, Western, Eastern Metro, just independent of that, we had 25% of our resources for any organizations that came in that were culturally specific or were nonprofits that were developing in rural. This is going to split that rural piece into that geographic set aside. So this culturally specific organizations will still have access to that 20% regardless of where they're developing. And then the remaining 80% of resources will be distributed amongst these geographic regions, which do now call out rural specific, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Better. So then, or I better understand. Thank you. So then the next part of my question is, what sort of consideration has been thought about how to better communicate to the rural organizations, because it seems that, they don't feel like they're being seen or targeted. And so, yes, I understand that we're going to move forward, or the recommendation is to change it and point this out, but I'm just wanting to know how that's going to be communicated so that they know that, yes, we saw your concern and this is how we're going to go about addressing it.
Yeah, I think, I think, so we have been doing a lot of engagement with the rural developers and organizations and sponsors who are seeing need in their community, opportunity to do projects, and wanting to understand and ensure there's access. So I think part of it is continuing those conversations and making sure that we are doing that looping back and talking. We also have a technical advisor team, and I think those are folks that are actively having a lot of those conversations. And I think some, the places where there are less infrastructure and less regular development going on, getting that project concept developed, supported, and that, finalized takes some, significant leg time. I think it does everywhere. And I think it's it's a harder body of work in a lot of ways in rural communities. And so I think all of those, as we will see the efforts underway, I think obviously the capacity investments, like we were just talking about in the home ARP recommendations, are another way where if we are seeding early investments to be able to support the work to get those project concepts. We also have pre-development grants and project feasibility loans active, which I think are all tools trying to look at finding the ways to support where different communities are. And I think that is the intention there. And I think we will, try to, I guess, my perspective, I think our next steps is continuing to make these refinements, measuring, looking, evaluating as we go, and where we are seeing resources unspent in rural communities, identify what are the different things that we could be doing to support that work happening. There's also, an state enterprise effort around, housing production and ensuring that there's communities active in strategizing how to meet their housing needs across the state.
Okay, thank you again. Really appreciate it. And this is a perfect example of why we need to dig into the numbers. So thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Chair Hall. A couple of thoughts, and I think I say this every time we talk about ORCA. I so respect and appreciate what is happening here. It is not perfect. It is not fully, baked and laid out. And the attitude that we're moving forward of like, let's test it. Let's make sure it's data. We might take some risks and then we come back. And so I just want to say I appreciate this so very much. As Councilmember Rogers said, this is exactly where we need to go. Got a couple of comments. Mitch, thank you for the clarification that it's 20% off the top for culturally specific, and then the 80% is going geographically. I want to make super clear that this is not an either or, that culturally specific organizations and projects are not forced into the 20% and can't access the geographic. And in fact, the best expectation I would have would be for there to be culturally specific projects that are coming out of both the set aside and the geographic. It is not an either or. We don't let ourselves off the hook for geography and not our racial justice and equity goals. So I just want to lift that up and be super overt about that. As I look at this slide, I also, and it doesn't need to be answered now, I also want us to reflect on cost per unit. Because when I look at these numbers, you might expect that in the, you might expect to not see that in the metro area that the units were greater than the funding, right? If you look at those both things, if you look at non-metro urban and suburban and small, you see that the number of units is quite a bit less than the amount of funding that's being received. And when you look at the rural, there's, what we're paying, we're getting the number of units percentage wise that we're investing funding in. So I would like to know more about that, because it is a little bit different than what my assumptions might be. So if we could learn more about that. And now that we have this data and this new typology, we can look at that. I fully support these changes. I fully support this new typology, and I'm excited to hear where we land on this, because it's a reflection of the organization asking and then listening well, and then coming back and making changes to the project. And that is absolutely how we need to go about this. So thanks, and look forward to hearing more.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Lee. I think I think we can absolutely bring back what the different kind of financing strategies and tools there are across different areas of work. I think these are always a really interesting balance. Land might be cheaper in rural communities than in urban, but there's more funding sources and more contractors and more readily available materials in some communities than others. And so those are always these really interesting and careful balances. And I think are something that we can make sure to be bringing back over as we are continuing to check in and start looking at the information. So I can maybe intend to be incorporating those types of explainers into our ORCA document as well. And I guess I also, on the operating side, we've also the team has done some incredible work, honoring all of both the research team as well as the ARH team, but looking at our operating expenses with those same types of lenses on them. And so I think we'll be able to hopefully bring that to Housing Stability Council next month.
Okay, Councilmember Meehan.
Thank you, Chair Hall. And I'd like to definitely echo the appreciation, Natasha, Mitch, and Megan, for the work, and also what Council Member Lee had just said about this is it. This is the start of the numbers to reflect what's going on and what the impact is. For clarification, when I said that a project was done, I meant the actual building and developing of the project. I didn't mean the DE, the equity inclusion component. That's never done. That's always going to be an ongoing thing, I think, as we know, or as I understand it to be. I don't think there's a done part on that. I don't, when we're flush there. Couple of things, really appreciate that circling back. That's one of the things that I was curious about. Maybe it was gone over, but I didn't catch it so much for the feedback. When a project gets done, when the development is done, and then developers come back to you, the contractors come back to you and say, hey, this didn't work out that way, just as we see in the rural community, and how that didn't balance out, and then making adjustments for that, which is amazing, Mitch, and appreciate those updates for that. What about how's it impacting the schools, the transportation, just different impact markers for the after a year, maybe 5 years later, I don't know, just having some of that idea of how did it affect the people that it's serving after the fact. And obviously it's too new to be thinking of what that looks like today, but going forward in the future, those are the kinds of things I'm curious about. How are the people, the community, the businesses, the kids growing up there, how are things going? Are we really actually impacting the whole group, and how do we know that? It's because we ask for feedback, and we do some kind of post studies over the time frame. I know that one thing, I've been doing a lot of legislative stuff, man, the budget, go HCS budget. So I know that the money's dollar game, and everybody's kind of on edge to see how the buckets are going to actually be filled with the money available from this legislative session. I've been doing a lot of getting my boots to the ground on that. And so I'm learning a lot this year, and I do appreciate everybody from OHCS working with me here and other places for better clarification and understanding. This is quite a complicated agency, has a lot of things going on, and I have learned so much. So I do appreciate, and just want to say thank you to the staff, Director Bell, Caleb, Yan, and others that have spent time with me about these different definitions of these things, and I'm trying to understand how this works. So I do appreciate digging into the meat of it and finding that we do have some discrepancies and keeping it transparent and moving forward. Good job, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Council, anything else? Well, another good lively discussion, and certainly this will be another thing we'll be looking at an ongoing basis. So we have our scheduled 15-minute break, so let's reconvene at 11:46. Thank you, everybody. Okay, everybody, we are at our time to reconvene. I think people are still coming in, so we'll just give it about 1 minute more. Okay, let's reconvene the Oregon Housing Stability Council. It is Friday, June 6, 2025. In history, the anniversary of D-Day. And at the present right now, we're going to hear the Homeownership Division report, and I'm happy to hand off to Division Director Keeble Giscombe.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair Hall, Director Bell, and prestigious members of the Council. My name is Keeble Giscombe, and I use he, him pronouns. I have the honor of serving as the Director for Homeownership here at Oregon Housing Community Service. Today, I'm proud to stand before you as we take an exciting step forward together, presenting recommendation for 18 new homeownership projects. These projects represent more than just numbers on a page. They reflect years of commitment, adaptation, and shared belief that homeownership should be within reach for all Oregonians. Before our team walk you through the details, I want to take a moment to reflect on the path we took to get here. Back in 2018, OHCS began funding homeownership development through the LIFT program. It quickly became clear, however, that for many nonprofit developers, especially those serving culturally specific communities, the program didn't quite fit. It was like trying to force a round peg into a square hole. For a time, we had to ask ourselves, is this the right tool? Can we make this work? But what happened next is what makes today so meaningful. Instead of walking away, we leaned in. In 2024, OHCS convened a LIFT working group, bringing together nonprofit developers and their legal teams, construction and mortgage lenders, and most importantly, our Department of Justice partners. We took on the challenges head on. Together, we re-managed the program. We shifted the evaluation model to a per home subsidy, creating standardized legal templates to clarify rights and responsibilities, and made critical changes to improve access to mortgage products. These weren't small adjustments. They were intentional, equity-centered reforms that designed to empower developers of all sizes, particularly those rooted in and accountable to diverse communities across Oregon. We also made important updates in this latest Notice of Funding Availability, our NOFA, by decoupling awards from appraised value to align with our work group's recommendation and evolving federal legal landscape. Some might have feared these changes could slow momentum, but what we've seen is the exact opposite. We've seen strong application, innovative design, and culturally responsible proposal that truly meet the needs of Oregon's communities. This year, applicants and the projects we're recommending today prove that thoughtful changes rooted in collaboration created better outcome. It's a testament to what's possible when we approach housing, not just as a policy issue, but as a collective responsibility. The project before you today will lead to 239 new homes over the next 3 years. Yes, that's 239 families who will experience the stability and opportunity that homeownership can provide. With gratitude for your continued support, I now invite our Senior Homeownership Development Program Analyst, Ms. Jessica McKinnon, to walk you through our recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Director Giscombe. I did see that we added a public hearing to this segment. I know a lot of our partners spoke earlier this morning. I didn't know if we wanted to pause to include that or if you're ready for me to speak.
Thank you for that, Jessica. Chair Hall, I will defer to you, I think by way of process, since we opened up a public hearing during affordable rental housing, and I believe the sum total or nearly the sum total of people that signed up to provide testimony did. I think that suffices by process. By way of good measure, Chair Hall, you could offer to open it up if there is somebody that has signed up or that hasn't signed up and would like to offer words, just to make sure we have not missed any members of the public.
Okay, that sounds good, Director Bell. Is there anybody in the public audience who would like to offer testimony on these homeownership transactions? Carl, and I don't want to mangle your name, but
Dinkelspiel.
Oh, okay, just like it's spelled. Okay, well, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so Jessica, I think we're gonna have this. The item I'm talking about is not the one that is presently in front of you. So I'm gonna let you guys know, council members, that I'm actually talking about the item that's after the one that Jessica is talking about right now, which has to do with the amendments. Anyway, so thank you very much, Chair Hall, for letting me speak for a few minutes. My name is Carl Dinkelspiel. I'm the interim executive director of Rooted Homes. And you'll hear about Rooted Homes project in the next portion of the conversation this morning. So thanks very much for having me on. I want to start by thanking Jessica and Talia in particular for their amazing help with our projects, with Rooted Homes projects. What I'm speaking today about is the Lift homeownership unit changes item, which follows this one that we're about to talk about. And I'm specifically talking about our project, the Rooted Homes project, Rooted at Antler. So our original request in 2024 NOFA was for $1.47 million in lift funds to apply to 18 units. That is the entirety of the units at the Rooted at Antler project. 2024 NOFA, as you just heard, used from Keeble, you just heard, used the appraisal methodology to determine value or the amount of lift funds, and that's how we got our $1.47 million. So the project is in Redmond, where the land values are low, but the housing production costs are roughly the same as they are in the valley. Cost us roughly $500,000 to build a unit. We applied with support from our friends at Washington Trust. We applied for $1 million in Federal Home Loan Bank this last year, and we thought that would be sufficient. They assured us that we would get that. We did not, so we ended up with a gap of about $1 million sometime at the early in 2025. So we have been scrambling to make up that gap, and we've tried a lot of different variations. The final variation that we ended up on is the one that you'll hear about in a few minutes, hopefully. So we would like to keep the $1.47 million from the 2024 NOFA and spread it across 11 of the 18 units rather than the full 18 units as originally proposed. We're doing this in order to be able to fill the gap. The 7 units will still be in our Rooted Homes Community Land Trust rubric. They'll be at 100% AMI versus 80% AMI. The 11 units that remain will all be at 80% AMI. And just by way of sort of comparison, that $1.47 million in lift funds equates to about $130,000 per unit. And I would note that that's about roughly 30% less than is in the 2025 NOFA. So I think, as Keeble said, big changes, important changes have come. We really appreciate the 2025 NOFA that changed from a appraisal-based formula to a per unit formula that has very much useful for our projects going forward, and we're grateful for that. Our project, the Rooted Antler, is ready to go. We have permits have been, I think, submitted this week. We're signing our GMP, our Guaranteed Maximum Price contract next week, and we expect to start construction in August once we have full approvals from our friends at OHCS. So we're very grateful for your support for this project, and hope that you will approve the change that Jessica will suggest in a few minutes. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else wanting to testify at this time on these homeownership transactions? If so, please use your raise hand function. Okay, looks like we don't have anyone else, so I think we can proceed with the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you so much. One moment. Well, good morning, Chair Hall, Director Bell, and honorable members of this Housing Stability Council. Thank you for having me today and happy Homeownership Month. I'm Jessica McKinnon. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Homeownership Development Program Analyst here at OHCS. Today, I'm pleased to bring you our recommendations for funding for our 2025 NOFA, which includes both LIFT and, for the first time, the Oregon Affordable Housing Tax Credit for limited equity co-ops. Before I get started, I also wanted to acknowledge and express my appreciation to all of our developers who spoke this morning. We're grateful to have such engaged and passionate partners in this program. During this presentation, rather than digging into all of the details about our NOFA, I wanted to talk a little bit about change and impact. We made some major strides with LIFT this year, and I'd really like to show the impact of that and then dive into our recommended projects. I wanted to start with the idea of iterative change and how every year we listen to our partners' feedback on our program, the application, and development in general, and work to make updates that help us better serve Oregon. This slide shows a chart of LIFT homeownership since its first NOFA in 2018. You can see that despite a dip in 2021, this program has continued to grow both in the amount of funding provided and the number of projects funded. I wanted to flag some more recent changes here. In 2022, OHCS separated LIFT homeownership from ARH and moved it into the homeownership division, where we were able to add capacity that could support and improve the program. In 2023, we offered our first round of HDIP, which included LIFT supplemental funding. That showed incredible growth in the interest in the program and demonstrated the level of impact that we could make if our resources had the flexibility to match the needs of our partners. Then last year, we offered our first non-competitive NOFA, which allowed us to open the doors of technical assistance and provide more support to both new and existing partners as they tried to navigate the complexities of LIFT. Across all of these years, though, there was a very clear gap that showed that LIFT was not able to meet all of the needs of Oregon. Through the history of our program, the maximum award that we could provide a project was the value of the land plus infrastructure. This was simply how LIFT worked. This worked fine for the lower density homes on land that was valued well, but it left out many rural projects where the land value was depressed, but the construction costs are just as high. It also disincentivized dense development where the land value would stay the same regardless of how many homes you put on it. So you can see from these charts here that LIFT doesn't have a great history of serving these kinds of projects. On the left, LIFT by itself was averaging one rural project each year until LIFT Supplemental launched in 2023 to fill that gap. But LIFT Supplemental was not a guaranteed resource, and in fact, we didn't have any to offer this year. On the right, I've charted our units supported in Multnomah County. Despite this area being highest need and full of resources, we weren't supporting it as well as we would have liked. I also feel that it's a good representation for density without having specific density data available for our projects. But you can see that our supported units each year is fairly variable, with a lot of years being pretty low in production. One more data set I wanted to show is just the map of where we've supported projects. I don't intend to dive too deeply into this, but it is clear that we have a lot of work to do to reach our more rural communities across the state. So let's talk about this year's changes. Director Giscombe shared a little bit about our work with the LIFT Homeownership Working Group during his introduction. Thanks to this work this year, we were able to offer our NOFA with a per unit subsidy offering. This means that we're able to award a project funding for the actual work being done and the actual homes being built. Rural and dense development should no longer be handicapped by our funding structure. Going into this change, we weren't sure how many new applicants or projects we could expect. Even without that restriction, LIFT and the NOFA process can be complex. So many of our other big changes this year focused on opening the door as wide as we could for new applicants who would be able to take advantage of this change. First, we developed set-asides specifically for small and emerging developers, counties that have been historically underserved by LIFT, and culturally specific organizations. The goal here was that these partners would have some space to apply and receive awards without essentially being immediately shut out by our larger, more experienced developers. Due to limited funding and high demand, we also placed caps on the award an applicant could receive. If any project needed more than $8 million, we requested that they phase their project and apply for the later phase next year. The third change we made was with the application timing. We added a 7-week buffer period between the launch of the NOFA and the first date that we would accept applications. The goal here was that applicants would be able to take their time with the application without worrying about their place in line, and it gave time for them to engage with us for technical assistance without putting themselves at a disadvantage. Based on our application and results, it does seem that this new approach has made a significant impact on our ability to serve Oregon. This year, we're running 18 projects for the full amount of our NOFA offering. Our recommendations include 7 new developers and over 200 new homes. I'm also happy to share that our updates to LIFT have seemed to make an impact on our rural and dense developments. This year, we had 8 projects that met our criteria to be considered rural, which is the greatest turnout to date. My colleagues spoke earlier about the upcoming change in the definition of rental, so I think it's important to note that OHCS's definition of rural changed for this year. But even going back to the old definition, we still would have seen 6 projects meet that criteria, which would tie our highest year with the launch of LIFT Supplemental. This is really great news considering we didn't offer any LIFT Supplemental this year, so these projects were supported with just LIFT alone. We also saw a big jump in units in Multnomah County. We're recommending 4 projects in Portland this year, all of which are fairly dense developments. 3 of these projects may not have been possible under the former LIFT requirements. I also quickly wanted to show our updated map. I'm excited to see a few new coastal projects, including our first on the South Coast, our first in Lynn County, and our first ever LIFT project in far eastern Oregon. We do still have a lot of work to do to reach these underserved areas of the state, but I'm pleased with the results so far. This slide just includes a few more fun facts about our recommendations today. First, our partners are expanding into different innovative models. 7 of our recommended projects are using some form of factory-produced construction, including manufactured, modular, and panelized. And we've received our first limited equity co-op for LIFT funding. Many projects this year were dedicated to being eco-friendly and environmentally conscious. 13 projects will be constructed to an environmental certification standard above Oregon requirements, and 6 will be constructed to full net zero standards or above. Our partners are working hard to build quality homes that will meet their buyers' needs. Among all of our recommendations, the average construction cost per unit was about $530,000, but these homes will sell on average for about $240,000. That means that these homes will sell for less than half the cost of building them. Quality housing is important for furthering equity, both for our buyers and for the communities in which they're built. All of our partners are required to meet a minimum standard of equity work, including engaging their communities in their decision-making or design process, equity in contracting, affirmative outreach, and education and services that ensure a buyer is more likely to be successful in their homes. Our developers build strong partnerships with their communities, with culturally specific organizations, provide multilingual or culturally responsive programming, and all have a plan for providing holistic pre- and post-purchase services to homebuyers. We collected a lot of qualitative information about each applicant's unique work in the equity sphere that is far too much to share today, But a couple of statistics include that we're directly funding 2 culturally specific organizations. 7 projects have partnered with a culturally specific organization, of which 4 shared that they're compensating that organization for their time. In a similar vein, 7 of our partners also compensated their residents or community members who took part in any surveys or meetings that contributed to their project or decision-making processes. Now, before I dive into our individual project recommendations, I wanted to take a moment to bring up this information that was shared in your packet. Without going into the numerical details here, we had our most active application cycle in the history of this program. This surge in interest is a great indicator in both the success of these changes and the incredible energy across our state to provide affordable homeownership opportunities to Oregonians. At the same time, it brought a new and difficult reality to our program that the funds we have available will no longer meet the needs of all of our applicants. We had to turn down strong, impactful, and high-quality projects this year, not because they lacked merit, but simply because the demand far exceeded our available funding. Our decisions weren't easy. I wanted to acknowledge here the passion and commitment of every organization that applied for this NOFA. Their work matters, and we remain committed to finding as many pathways as possible to support these efforts now and into the future. Excuse me. I'd like to shift now to our formal project recommendations. In the interest of time, I've tried to spend no more than 1.5 minutes on each project. Most of the information shown on the slide is also available in your packet. Please also note that the narratives in your packet and on the slide were my best attempt at distilling a lot of information for each project into a much smaller blurb. So what I'm able to share today is not every highlight from that project. I'll start with our set-aside awardees. There was a lot of overlap in eligibility between the 2 categories, so I'm including both in this section, but I will share for each project with set-asides, or which set-aside we're drawing from. And this section will include smaller projects from small and emerging developers, which is 20% of our funds, and projects from culturally specific developers and in counties underserved by LIFT, which is 30% of our total funds. Our first recommendation is for Parkview, a development in La Pine by Habitat for Humanity, La Pine Sun River. This developer received development subsidy funds from us in 2023, and that project was successfully completed this year. This project represents a shift to the CLT and permanent affordability model for them and their community. This development includes 10 duplex units, all 3-bed, 2-bath, and is additionally supported by Habitat for Humanity Rural Ready funding. The average sales price is $202,000. These homes are net zero energy ready, include a heat pump and whole home ventilation, and are all visitable with a bedroom on the ground floor. Habitat for Humanity La Pine Sun River maintains strong community relationships and referral partners to identify local buyers. They partner with Neighbor Impact to provide homebuyer education and other supportive services and offer simultaneous translation to families who do not speak English as their first language. We recommend funding this project with $2.1 million LIFT from the Small and Emerging Set-Aside. Waldport Forest Parkway is a development by Habitat for Humanity of Lincoln County in Waldport. This project is for a single 5-bedroom manufactured home with accessibility designed to meet the specific needs of a family that has already been identified by the organization. Their application included a lot of fantastic and specific information about how this home's accessibility will serve that family. Habitat for Humanity of Lincoln County meets the criteria for almost all of our set-asides, including rural, small, and emerging, and Lincoln County is one of our counties that has been underserved by LIFT. While the buyers for this home have already been chosen, this Habitat affiliate does have a track record of serving all of their community, with almost 30% of homes since 2021 serving households identifying as Hispanic, and 40% of their construction and office staff identifying as BIPOC. We recommend funding this project with $250,000 LIFT from the Small and Emerging Set-Aside. The Albany Area Habitat for Humanity Ermine Project is a 6-unit cottage cluster development of small homes less than 900 square feet. This is a development type that is not common in Albany, but is valuable to aging populations or those seeking less home maintenance. These homes are net zero homes certified by the Energy Trust of Oregon, providing central air and all electric appliances. All homes will be visible and half will be built to full ADA standards. Construction will include modular elements, saving time and reducing waste. These homes will sell for just over $100,000 each. Albany Area Habitat is another affiliate seeking LIFT for the first time, representing a continued transition to the CLT and permanent affordability model in Oregon. This affiliate continues to engage their community through conversations, surveys, and listening sessions, and maintains partnerships with local organizations and community leaders to provide culturally relevant and accessible outreach. A partnership with the Affordable Housing Partnership Homeownership Center provides education and supportive services to their buyers. We recommend funding this project with $990,000 LIFT from the Small and Emerging Set Aside. Affordable Albina is a new townhome development in Portland's Albina neighborhood. This 12-home townhouse development is sponsored by Levin Community, an organization dedicated to community work and equitable race-conscious housing advocacy in the faith space. They're partnering with Owen Gabbert as the experienced developer and Proud Ground as the CLT and land steward. These homes will be net zero with solar panels included and sell for $240,000 each, well below the typical cost in this high opportunity neighborhood. This development included significant outreach to the BIPOC community during the design phase, and Owen Gabbert heard loud and clear that their community didn't want stacked townhomes. They wanted front and back doors with their own private garden. These replicable designs have been created to easily provide both private yards and a central shared open space. While this project isn't specifically tied to the North-Northeast preference policy, it will target outreach to those on the wait list and provide additional culturally relevant services to buyers through Proud Ground. We recommend funding this project with $2,460,000 LIFT from the Small and Emerging Set Aside. Mills Lane is an 11-unit development in Forest Grove by Westwellity Habitat for Humanity. This project is a mix of detached and townhome style starter homes built in an existing residential community and designed to match their surroundings. These are sizable homes, with the largest having 5 bedrooms and 1,500 square feet. All of the units are fully visitable with master bedrooms on the ground floor, solar ready, and built to Energy Star standards. 40% of these units will be sold to households earning below 50% AMI. Westwellity Habitat engages in continuous feedback loops with their community through an intentional effort to recruit representative community members in their staff and board. They also monitor applications and homebuyer needs to ensure that their programs are meeting the needs of the households they serve. Culturally relevant outreach and education is managed through a partnership with Bienestar and the African American Alliance for Homeownership. We recommend funding this project with $2,335,000 LIFT from the Small and Emerging Set Aside. Southeast Naomi Way is a small triplex development by McMinnville Area Habitat for Humanity. These 3 1,200 square foot starter homes will be near Linfield University, designed to be basic and meet the needs of their buyers, and will be sold at a price of just $125,000, affordable to households earning between 40 and 65% AMI. MAC Habitat is an established developer with one other project in our LIFT pipeline. They have a demonstrated history of serving underserved populations, with 70% of households served to date identifying as BIPOC. They recently received a language access grant from OHCS, which they've used to expand translation of their materials into Spanish, and have identified some new culturally relevant partners in their community to help them better reach communities that are underserved in homeownership. We recommend funding this project with $615,000 LIFT. This will use the last funds in the Small and Emerging Set Aside, and the remaining will be covered by funds in the culturally specific and counties underserved by LIFT Set Aside. The Northeast 13th Street Homeownership Project is a 31-unit development in Portland by Self Enhancement Inc., or SEI. SEI is a culturally specific developer providing a wealth of services in Northeast Portland, serving primarily Black or African American households who continue to live in the neighborhood or who have been displaced. They have recently broadened into rental and then homeownership development to continue to support their community in a culturally specific way. Their services now help move their clients through the housing continuum. This is the first phase of a larger project of around 50 units. It will incorporate multiple styles of modular construction, saving time, energy, and waste, and all homes will be constructed to net zero standards. Additional environmental focus will be on the wetlands on site, which will be preserved and enhanced for the residents now living close to this natural resource. All homes will be family-sized and visitable, and the project has already been selected for some grants with more applications underway. We recommend funding this project with $6,415,000 lift from the culturally specific and underserved counties set aside. Frontier Court is a 14-unit cottage development in La Grande by the Grand Ronde Valley Habitat for Humanity. This project is a mix of cottages from 480 to 1,000 square feet. The small one-bedroom units will be the first of this size in La Grande and will fill an empty but needed market for seniors, veterans, and other households who are looking for smaller homes. Larger homes will meet the need of low-income families. These homes will use modular construction will be accessible and visitable and be solar ready with all electric appliances and HVAC. La Grande Valley Habitat is one of the few remaining volunteer-run affiliates and is partnering with experienced developer GCT Land Management for this pilot project and Community Connections for outreach and supportive services. The goal is to sell these homes to households earning below 65% AMI with an average price point of just over $86,000. This will be our first lift homeownership development in Far East Oregon. We recommend funding this project with $2,286,000 lift from the culturally specific and underserved counties set aside. Cathedral Park Co-Housing is a development by a new culturally specific partner, Our Home Inclusive Community Collaborative. Located in the St. John's neighborhood of Portland, this development seeks to bring residents of all incomes, ages, and abilities together into one community-focused space. This development is 23 total units, 11 of which will be affordable and supported by LIFT. The other 12 will be market rate. This development is a 4-story stacked multifamily condo complex and a great example of how our new award structure can be used for these higher density projects. The homes are universally designed, accessible, and adaptable. 20% of the units will be reserved for households or persons experiencing intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our Home is an organization founded by people who experience disabilities or family members of people who experience disabilities who seek to use the co-housing model to address isolation and lack of community. Our Home is partnering with Owen Gabbert LLC to lead the development, and Proud Ground provides education and support to home buyers and ultimately provide long-term management of the land trust and lift loan. We recommend funding this project with $1,995,000 lift from the culturally specific and underserved counties set aside. The Wall Street Duplex is a single duplex in Coos Bay by Coos County Habitat for Humanity. This will be the first project that we're able to serve in southern coastal counties. Each unit is about 1,400 square feet with 2 bedrooms and 1.5 baths. The homes are all electric with visitable or above accessibility. Each unit will sell for $150,000. Coos County Habitat is a small and emerging developer. They continue to provide their own mortgages, which assures an affordable and supportive loan for their buyers. They also work to identify other supportive services for each buyer, such as down payment assistance or IDAs. Of their most recent 18 homes, 9 of them have been sold to households identifying as Hispanic and speaking Spanish as their primary language. We recommend funding this project with $385,000 lift from the culturally specific and underserved counties set aside. Makara Landing is a new development from Thistle and Nest that expands their work out of Central Oregon and to coastal Lincoln City. The full project includes 30 townhomes up to 1,570 square feet. This project will be built on a natural site and will preserve and incorporate old growth trees in the site design. Homes are solar ready, built with fire resistant materials, all electric with heat pump, and half the units will be universally designed, visitable with at least one bedroom on the first floor. Thistle and Nest has been a consistent and growing partner. They provide education and counseling services through a partnership with Neighbor Impact and pride themselves on making local connections and partnerships for culturally responsive outreach. Currently, they'll be providing outreach through Arco Iris Cultural and will contract with a local project manager. This is the first project where we're going to request your approval in a slightly different way than we usually do. With this being a highly competitive NOFA, we had to partially fund 3 projects this year. We have communicated with all of these partners to make sure that the project is still feasible if they take less money now and come back for more next year. For this project, we have $1,447,280 remaining in the culturally specific and underserved counties set aside. We recommend providing all of that available funding now, which will support 7 units, but also recommend that you approve this project for up to $5,850,000. In the case that any awards are declined or reduced during underwriting, this would allow us to redirect those funds into this project without further approval. It also means that if the project comes back next year for the same total lift award, we'll be able to expedite the award process as they will have already been approved. And I'll move now to our projects in the general applicant category. This category includes many of our larger long-term developers and was very competitive this year. This set aside included 50% of our total funds. Woodlands Phase 2 is the second phase of a larger project by Sisters Habitat for Humanity and Sisters Oregon. In partnership with a market developer, Sisters Habitat will provide 10 total affordable units in an otherwise market rate subdivision. The home exteriors will match others in the neighborhood, providing a truly mixed income experience for buyers. These 3 2-bed, 2-bath homes will sell for just $167,000 each. Sisters Habitat has worked with us on other projects in 2018, 2021, and the first Woodlands phase awarded last year. They are increasing their capacity to equitably serve the community, including the completion of a DEI assessment that guided many of the goals in their 3-year strategic plan, and an expansion of language across many of their programs and materials. We recommend funding this project with $570,000 lift. Rosa Village is a new 52-unit development in Eugene by Square One Villages. This will be small units in a village-style layout with plenty of open space and natural pathways. Rosa Village will provide shared amenities like an 1,800 square foot common house with a community kitchen and gathering space, a central lawn with raised garden beds, mature trees, and a fenced dog run. Rosa Village will be our first limited equity co-op supported by Lyft. In a limited equity co-op model, the residents collectively own their homes through the co-op and will pay an affordable monthly housing payment, which will contribute to the collective mortgage, operating, and maintenance expenses. Square One will retain ownership of the land to ensure permanent affordability and provide technical assistance to the co-op. Square One provides services all along the housing continuum. Their board includes members of their co-ops, and they engage in an affirmative outreach council and a resident advisory council to guide their work and ensure that they're making positive and equitable impact. They work with the Eugene Springfield NAACP and Transponder to provide culturally relevant materials and engage often with the unhoused populations who use their other services. We recommend funding this project with $7,506,996 lift. and $1,745,924.67 in OAHTC, which will offset the cost of their permanent loan and lower monthly payment costs for residents. Southtown 3 is the third phase of the larger Southtown development in Corvallis, spearheaded by Dev Northwest. Excuse me. We've provided support for both phase 1 and phase 2 of this project, and they're returning for funding for the third phase. This phase will include 11 three-bed townhome units. Later phases will include a neighborhood center with rental and commercial, leading to a walkable neighborhood with all needed services. Homes in this phase are developed with efficiency in mind, saving costs on installation of utilities and foundation costs. Dev Northwest provides many services to their communities and have recently built upon efforts to serve the Hispanic and Spanish-speaking community. They hosted a culturally specific home buying class last year, and this year are launching a bilingual class on community land trusts. They have built partnerships with Casa Latinos Unidos and the Corvallis Multicultural Literacy Center, and continue to provide financial services such as a match savings program, down payment assistance, and closing cost assistance. Currently, 31% of buyers in the pipeline identify as BIPOC, and they have seen recent growth in Hispanic applicants. We recommend funding this development with $2,255,000 lift. Larch Grove is an eco-focused development in Bend by Thistle and Nest. This development will include 13 2- and 3-bedroom cottage cluster homes constructed using the Hempcrete wall system, which is an earth-friendly, carbon-neutral, insulating, and fire-resistant building technology. Gray water will be recycled and reused for the native landscaping. 2 of the units will be fully accessible, and 2 units will be reserved for households earning below 50% AMI. This project will be constructed on land secured from the City of Bend through a competitive RFP. Thistle and Nest will provide most of the same services to Bend as I spoke about for Lincoln City, but with different partnerships. The Latino Community Association is their partner for culturally relevant and bilingual outreach in Central Oregon. We recommend funding this development with $2,485,000 lift. Rooted at North Point is a development in Redmond, Oregon, part of the larger community expansion of the urban growth boundary in Redmond. This development will ultimately provide 30 affordable homes. Northwest Community Housing Foundation is spearheading the project, partnering with Edlin & Co. as developer and Rooted Homes as the long-term steward of the community land trust. These homes will be between 2 and 4 bedrooms, feature carbon-neutral net zero designs with solar panels and a heat pump. The site will also feature a fruit tree area and a community garden. Rooted Homes, as the future land steward, will manage the outreach and homebuyer support. Rooted Homes has a demonstrated history of serving underserved populations using a selection criteria that prioritizes first-generation homebuyers. 75% of their homebuyers in the last 5 years have identified as BIPOC. More recently, Rooted Homes has been working with Second Muse to develop a mortgage lending program for I-10 borrowers. Unfortunately, we don't have enough funding available to support this development in full. We recommend funding the first 14 homes immediately with $2,881,284 lift, but also seek your approval to fund this project up to $6,030,000 should funding come available or they apply for the remainder next year. Cary Boulevard is a 50-home development in Northeast Portland, including townhomes ranging from 2 to 4 bedrooms and 2 to 3 bathrooms. I apologize, there was an error in your packet which stated this development was in Lapine in Deschutes County. It is in fact in Portland. The development is built on land previously owned by the City of Portland and will center green space into the development. Many trees will be preserved, including a large heritage tree. 34 new trees will be planted, and homes will be built to Earth Advantage Platinum standards. Habitat Portland is committed to equity in all of their projects. Their 5-year strategic plan includes $1 million to the Advancing Black Homeownership Initiative and an I-10 lending initiative. They also recently engaged a consultant to determine if their programs and developments were meeting the needs of foundational Black households in Portland, and many of the recommendations from this project have been implemented in Cary Boulevard. The project has secured significant additional funding, especially from the Portland Housing Bureau. It is so well leveraged that Portland Habitat asked for only 2/3 of the LIFT funds that the project could have been eligible for. While the full project could have been funded under this NOFA, Habitat Portland generously offered to phase the project at only 30 units to help us better diversify our awards this year. We recommend funding this development immediately with $4,020,000 LIFT, with the potential to fund up to $6,700,000 $6,700,000 should more funds come available or they apply next year. Our final recommendation is for Bear Creek Village. This is an 8-townhome ecologically conscious development in Bend by Bend Redmond Habitat for Humanity. This project will be constructed with structurally insulated panels along with other energy and carbon efficient modifications. The homes will meet passive home certifications, which is a standard above net zero. Passive homes not only reduce energy consumption and utility bills, they are also better insulated and more fire resilient. The land for this project was awarded to Bend Redmond Habitat for Humanity as part of a competitive RFP with the City of Bend. Bend Redmond Habitat for Humanity has a construction team of mostly women breaking gender barriers in the construction industry. They also work to make an equitable impact on their community through these homes. 50% of this project will be fully ADA accessible, and outreach materials will be provided in English and Spanish and distributed to local partners, including the Latino Community Association. We recommend funding this project with $1,560,000 LIFT. And with that final recommendation, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I'm eager to hear your thoughts and happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, Council, any questions on this great list about any specific project or, okay, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you for the work and for this list and presentation. I appreciate the visual nature of going through the project. It's very helpful to see. And I want to notice that what information is being presented under the equity column has a very wide range of content, focus, and specificity, that a number of these things I would say do not actually respond to the issue of equity. So I don't know if that's a reflection of the work that staff is doing with the project sponsors, or if that's just an artifact of it's a very tiny space. You can't put a lot of information there. So I would just encourage the team to continue to look at this. And maybe it is helpful to have a discussion in the future about what type of equity we're talking about, right? I have often, again, when we've used this word equity, we have often had the conversation, this is racial justice and equity. So for me, the first dimension of equity has to do with racial justice, right? Race and ethnicity. There are, of course, many other dimensions of equity, including geographic equity and diversity, gender, disability, et cetera, et cetera. It would be helpful to have some kind of definition here, because some of what we're talking about speaks to racial justice, equity. Other of it tries to speak to it, and I would say is inadequate to that. And it feels a little bit with some of these projects that we're simply offering something to get in there. I don't think that's the work that staff are doing. So again, it may be some kind of a construct with this tiny space. I do want to notice this wide range of responses and want to ask staff, not at this moment, to come back and tell us how you are defining equity and how you're reflecting it in your work with project sponsors. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on the council interested in weighing in at this point with any feedback or questions? Councilmember Mania.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I just want to say how exciting it is to have all these home ownership units being built, and you can see the graph over the years, and home ownership is very, very important in the housing continuum, and I'm very excited to see this type of investments and the geography in which these developments are happening. So great job, and thank you.
Chair Hall, if I may, I appreciate
Yes,
all of
of
the
course.
appreciate all of this, all of the conversation, all of the
Mhm.
feedback. Several things come to mind. The first is it was mentioned before, but I think it bears worth repeating. There were and are a lot of partners, including those in which some of our resources didn't work for them in their community, and they still chose to spend time with us to help us get this right. And so I want to just really reaffirm one, how valuable that is to us, and also how incredibly gracious it is of them. There are fewer scenarios that I can think of, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, where if something isn't working, and then when you're asking for my time to help make it better, I may or may not. And so the fact that a lot of partners took the time, chose the time to help us get this right is incredibly invaluable to me and for us, and also hope that it is reflective in the outcomes and in the process. And the process, not only by way of which things do you fill out in which dimensions, but the process by which you feel like we are accessible and engaging and hearing and responding, and that it's delivering the outcomes. Because at the end of the day, that is what this is about, the outcome of the process of our partners and the outcome of the people that we serve across Oregon. And so incredibly grateful. There is a unique dimension of gratitude that I think is worth noting, particularly for culturally specific organizations in rural communities. I think the value and vibrancy of those partners and the work that they have done has not always been reflected, and in many ways isn't still fully reflective of the manner in which we deliver our work. And so I want to just offer that unique dimension of gratitude, because I think it's worth noting. And there's a lot that I could say there, but I'm grateful to the partners for that. To the council, this is an area where we will be bringing back what we are learning in the process. And so I think over the next 3 to 6 months, we're going to be talking about a lot of volume of things, but also a lot of things that we will be learning, and some of the things that we won't get right. And we're going to have to deal with that, confront it, and then get it right. Mistakes are inevitable. I would prefer to have fewer than more, but doing the big work that is incumbent upon us, I want to make sure that we can normalize that and learn together in that. And then the last couple of things I say, of course, Councilmember Mena, grateful for just the volume of progress. I think this is an area of thinking about where states and localities do offer the benefit, the burden, and sometimes the salvation of offering continuity, particularly in a changing landscape. And I imagine there will be more of that. That's on us. And so gratitude for that. And also acknowledgement for Councilmember Lee's comments around, I think noting one around a definition of equity, probably a good time to clarify how we are viewing that in theory and in practice, and whether that aligns, and if it doesn't, with the council, and then what that means for our work together. And then some homework to reassess sort of the process by which we are articulating what we are receiving, and whether it's a process thing and a sort of technical thing of how many words can you fit into a thing, and then you're having to choose the words, and or whether there is something more substantive in which we need to learn about the actual work. And so I'll just forecast, I would imagine that some of that work will happen in between council meetings, in addition to the council meetings, which will be bringing some stuff. And so if folks can bear with us in that work, I think it will be worth noting. And then the last thing, because I'm sure folks are toe tapping, I get it. We're closing out on our time. I'm grateful to the home ownership team. And if I told Keeble in advance that I would do this, he probably would not have shown up today. So immensely grateful for your leadership. I have put a tall order on you, and you would never say that maybe in this, a very tall order. And you have delivered, and I think have also held me accountable to as well, to several things along the way. And so I'm grateful for the work that we're going to be doing. And I think it provides a really solid foundation for the work that's in front of us. So I'm appreciative of the council. Thanks for all the folks that helped get us here. And here's to keeping this going as well.
Yes. Council, want to weigh in on, again, Councilmember Rogers?
Yes, I would just like to say thank you for this work. Thanks for the diversity of projects. Yes, there's more work to be done in refining how we measure things, but I really think that we are moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Council. We need to take action on these requests, and you will find the motion on page 31 of our packet.
So moved.
Someone? Okay, and is there a second now?
I'll
Second.
Okay, several seconds. That's great. Can we have the roll call now, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
No.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan,
Yes.
Councilmember Willard,
Yes, sorry, couldn't find the mute button.
thank you. Motion passes.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Now, we've got one more item, I believe, from homeownership. And is staff ready with that one?
Yes, thank you. Great. Well, this second request will hopefully be a quick one and get everyone on their way to lunch. This is a technical change for 3 projects that DOJ let us know recently that we do need your approval to move forward with. Just to provide a little bit of background, it's common for our partners to encounter something in their developments that either increases costs or reduces the amount of funding that should have been available for the project. Most of the time, these are easily absorbed by contingencies or other planned risk mitigation strategies. Other times, we need to approve changes to the project as part of value engineering or allow partners to extend their project to find new funding sources. In my previous presentation, I talked about how tying the LIFT award to the value of the land caused problems for rural and dense developments, but there were some other issues as well. Projects that are still trying to provide density, quality improvements, deeper affordability, or build in rural or other challenging areas who did receive LIFT funding have often already value engineered their project, tapped all of their other resources, and have tight budgets with limited flexibility. So in these cases, we work with our partners to identify creative solutions that can fill the gap while still preserving the intent and identity of these projects. One of these creative solutions, and the one that we need your approval on today, is to adjust the affordability requirements of the project to allow a limited number of homes to sell to households earning up to 120% AMI. With this solution, they would be able to keep their full LIFT award and use the funds from the increased sales prices to fill their funding gap. We also find the solution beneficial to us in Oregon, even though we are losing some 80% AMI units, 120% AMI homes and mixed income communities still make a positive impact in the state and is a product that we don't have a lot of other mechanisms to create. Additionally, if these projects had come to us initially with similar mixed income approach, we likely would have approved it for the same award. We have consulted with DOJ on this to make sure that our plans align with LIFT requirements. LIFT can only fund the 80% AMI homes, so we'll need to make amendments to the project's legal documents to reduce the number of supported units. This is what we're here for today. The 120% AMI homes will still be held in the CLT, and OHCS will have an operating agreement and security on that land, but the project will only be able to actually spend funds on the 80% AMI units and their proportional share of shared expenses like infrastructure or common areas. We make sure that these awards are still within the bounds of their applicable NOFA. So if the NOFA maximum award was the value of the land and infrastructure, or $200,000 per unit, whichever is lesser, we make sure that the new structure doesn't go over that $200,000 per unit maximum. Additionally, adding 120% AMI homes can make a project require prevailing wage. We ask that our partners making this transition confirm with BOLI whether or not this applies to them. None of today's recommended projects should require prevailing wage. The first project we're recommending for this change is rooted at Antler. Carl spoke about this one earlier. This is a duplex and cottage project by Rooted Homes that was awarded last year and is part of a larger mixed-use development in partnership with Housing Works that is aiming to also provide childcare centers. Unfortunately, they were not selected for one of their anticipated grants, which left them with about $1 million gap. They identified some alternative funding to help fill the gap, but still required some additional flexibility from us to make the project fully feasible. For this project, we recommend reducing the project to 11 lift-funded homes. 7 additional units will be provided at 120% AMI. The project is ready to close and get started once we have your approval. Our second project is Taylor's Ferry, a townhome development in Portland by Habitat for Humanity Portland region. This is an older project from 2021 that has encountered a number of challenges during development. This project focuses on larger family-sized homes from 3 to 5 bedrooms and has additional funding from PSEF, SHOP, and Business Oregon. We approved an extension for this project to June 30th, 2026 after it experienced significant supply chain issues and permitting delays. Habitat Portland encountered a number of unexpected costs for public improvements, foundations, and stormwater systems due to the steep grade of the site. They did a lot of work trying to identify resources that could help them cover these new costs, but eventually needed to reach out to us to see if there was any support we could provide or any additional resources. We recommend reducing this project to 11 lift-funded homes. An additional 6 homes will be built for 120% AMI. Construction has already begun on this project and will need to amend their documents, but this will ensure that they're able to sell their first homes in a timely manner. Our third project is Thompson Springs by Sammy's Place, which was approved last year. This project is in Nehalem in Tillamook County and is focused on providing affordable and supportive housing to residents experiencing intellectual or developmental disabilities. Homes are small, fully accessible, and universally designed with the goal of providing seamless living for residents of all abilities. This project underwent significant work even before they applied to LIFT last year. With support from DEQ and the EPA, Sammy's Place completed brownfield remediation on the site to make it buildable. They also received one of our pre-development and capacity building grants in 2023 to engage a consultant to create their universal design plans. Unfortunately, they encountered a chain of unexpected issues after their LIFT approval. First, as they completed the required pre-development work, they learned that their wetlands on site had grown. This impacted their site plan and ultimately required them to reduce the project to 10 homes. This triggered the need for a new appraisal, which came in significantly below what was expected. This required us to reduce their LIFT award from $2.2 million to $1,420,000, which left them with a noticeable gap. They've been incredibly transparent through these situations, and we've worked side by side with them every step as they've managed these barriers. We recommend reducing this project to 8 LIFT-funded homes. An additional 2 units will be built for 120% AMI. This will help them fill that gap while also ensuring some of those homes will still be able to serve households experiencing IDD. And as I close out of this presentation, I did want to add one more piece of context. These 3 partners submitted their applications with the full intent to serve households below 80% AMI, and that's still their goal. This change will allow these project performance to balance, which will allow them to move forward with construction. Our partners are still investing much of their own equity to make these projects work, and they'll all continue to look for additional resources to ensure that as many of these homes as possible will support those 80% AMI households. Thank you again for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about these recommendations.
Council, any questions here? Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Hey, Chair Hall. Thank you, Jessica, for the information. I'm interested in hearing more about the prevailing wage issue. So as a result of the action we're taking now, we're potentially making these projects liable to the prevailing wage requirements. Although I thought I heard you say you don't think that's going to happen here. They have to do their due diligence and request. Is that correct?
That's correct. My understanding of prevailing wage is that if 60% or more of your units are below 80% AMI, it is not subject to prevailing wage. We do request that they do their due diligence because of this change, but as it stands, all of these projects still have more than 60% of the units still below 80% AMI.
I'm curious, and this will have to, if this is a new thing we're going to try, which I completely support. If we continue to have these kinds of situations, and this is going to be part of the tools in the toolbox, if we provoke a prevailing wage situation, that might actually not pencil out with the selling of units at the 120 rate. So I'm just interested to, like, in a worst case scenario, whatever people are paying now and prevailing wage goes here, right? Whatever that cost is versus what we're allowing people to sell at the higher rate for 120. I'm interested to know how those metrics relate to each other or might possibly compete with each other in terms of making the total project viable, which we won't know until we try it. I'm just noticing that you wanted us to see the prevailing wage challenge, and I think it could be a challenge. If it comes back saying, yes, you're liable to prevailing wage, we might have a challenge here, and we might have it in the future if we continue to approach that. So I'm just raising that and saying I'm interested in learning more about it.
I think your estimate that it might increase costs more than the increased sales value would work to balance is probably accurate. This is why we do have them do that additional due diligence. And I wanted to flag it specifically so that you would know that we are doing that due diligence. I think in the case that it did trigger prevailing wage, we would need to go back and again fully redo their pro forma with the new costs of labor and underwrite the project considering those new costs.
Let me just actually say one other thing. This is a challenging area, right? Mm-hmm. Prevailing wage is something that our unions have fought for over years. I mean, the history of union organizing, we do a lot of our projects on the margin of that because we're trying to get people housed at the least cost, right? There is a value that says we pay prevailing wage because it is a union right that has been fought and won. So we're trying to be at this flexion point of the most units for the least cost possible for the most people possible. And yet we have this prevailing wage value and requirement in some projects that we certainly want to honor in terms of our relationships with unions, right? So I think we've got to be conscious about where we're saying, please don't put us under prevailing wage, and we should be paying prevailing wage. And that's a policy discussion. That's not a project-based discussion or issue. I just want to raise this for the council, and would love to have some conversation about what's our position on this, what's our policy around it, because there's some oppositional values that run up here.
Councilmember Lee, I appreciate that. And as you're raising that for reflection and as a segue for future conversation for this body, this particular policy, particularly from a federal perspective, is a place where we're going to have a lot of conversation and probably tough and important decision points, particularly because just for example, environmental reviews, Davis-Bacon, prevailing wages. On its face, the intent of those things are not bad. They are not bad, particularly when we think about union, yes. And, we talked about equity in contracting, which is we want to support our workforce. They are part of Oregon, and we want to be able to support the workforce. And that's like part of the potential benefit if you do this right. And we have experienced ourselves, particularly in bureaucracy, and I don't think bureaucracy has to be all bad. It protects us from a lot of things as well. And I think when you begin to layer a lot of things, there are substantive areas where you get increased time, increased cost, additional complexity, particularly when those state and federal policies are duplicative. And I will just say, in a scenario where there might be less staff and less people to do those things that already take 8 months to a year, they're not going to move any quicker. And so in a business where time is literally money, I think we will be talking a lot about regulatory reforms, decision points in front of us, and where we can make sure that the right protections of workforce, of projects, of all of the things are still there, while also naming that a lot of good intent has piled up, and now the sum of those things are not always serving us and our development partners as well. So thank you for raising that. And if you never thought you'd have an exciting regulatory conversation over the next few months, we will promise to deliver.
All right. Anybody else on the council with anything to bring to the table at this time? Questions, discussion? Well, would somebody be willing to make the motion? You'll find this motion on page 90 of the packet. All we need is a so moved. Anybody?
I move to approve the motion.
Okay. Would somebody make a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, great.
Jinx, you owe me a soda.
All righty, let's have the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
No.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan.
Yes.
Councilmember Willard.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Right. I'll just circle back with Director Bell one more time, but I think we are at the point of the agenda where we've concluded business. Thank you, Director Giscombe, and your team. I'm sorry, I should have paused. Director Bell.
Nope, nothing further, Chair Hall.
All right. Thanks to the council, thanks to staff, and thanks to everybody who was part of our virtual community today. We will see you in July.
Thank you.
Bye for now.